And this is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Left 127. Tonight, we have a guest on at 5 o'clock. The paperback edition of a book he published last year has come out, and it's fascinating, very well written, sad, but in some ways beautiful book about his experiences in Iraq as in the bomb disposal unit in the Air Force, explosive ordnance disposal. And it's called The Long Walk, a story of war and a life that follows. So we'll be with him in about a minute. Just a couple of announcements. Starting at 6 o'clock, we're going to talk about what happened in Boston and try to expand into the general area of what is terrorism, who are the terrorists, maybe not who you think, and other discussions like that. And I hope you're all ready to call up about this. Let's see, what else? Some people sent me emails and said that at 7 p.m., if you're on XM, this has happened before, the show cuts off. I've explained this before. It has something to do with the fact that they need the channels for sports spillover. So if you want to listen to the, I don't know, Claretown Beagles playing the Thunderbolts or something, then you have to listen to it whether you like it or not. So if this bothers you, then, you know, you're paying for a subscription. You should get in touch with the people down here who are in charge of that and tell them, because there's not much I can do about it. Let's see. Also, if you want to find out, you want to listen to shows I do, radio shows, go to iTunes, the iTunes store, and I guess, or try some app like that. Just put my name in, and you might turn up some other stuff to listen to. All right, as I mentioned before, we have with us Brian Castner. It's Castner. Brian Castner, who had a book published last year called The Long Walk, a story of war and the life that follows. And it's his story about being in Iraq and being involved in these bomb disposal units, and then coming back here and trying to deal with what the people in Vietnam used to call the real world. Now, this is Mr. Castner's, let me put it this way, sort of second tour of book interview duty, and maybe his 300th mission to a radio show, TV, or newspaper. So I hope you'll have some patience with us, all right, Mr. Castner?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, and thank you for your kind words about the book.
Oh, sure. It's really quite a book. It's very striking. You must have spent a lot of time on this, right?
I didn't. It was
just came out, huh?
Well, yeah. It needed to come out. It was kind of biological, and I didn't. I had never written a book. I had written other things, but articles and things for newspapers. I had no idea how long writing a book was supposed to take, and my wife gave me a year, and then she said, "You need to, move on and get a real job and do something else." And so maybe with that,
job, right? Not a writer.
Right. With that motivation, I did. I got it done in 11 months, and people tell me that's fast, but I didn't know any different.
That's not bad. All right, so let me introduce you more formally here to the listeners. Brian Castner, the book is called The Long Walk, a story of war and the life that follows. As a graduate of Marquette University and with a degree in electrical engineering. And he served 3 tours in the Middle East as an officer in the U.S. Air Force, 2 of them as head of the EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit, EOD unit in Iraq. 2006, he received a Bronze Star for his service. Upon returning to the United States following his service, he consulted as an independent civilian contractor, training military EOD units on tactical bomb disposal procedures prior to the deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan. So this book is essentially, it interweaves your experiences over there and then what happened to you when you came back, which is still sort of, you yourself are kind of like a work in progress still, right?
I'd say so. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think nearly all of us that come back are a work in progress in some way. I think the things you learn over there you can never unlearn, and you're just a different person. So that used to bother me. That's one of the main things that bothered me, is what a different person I was, and maybe I've come to accept some of that. But yeah, the book is both, and they're interweaved. It's both there and coming home. And I was just trying to write the book as it felt, and it felt like everything was happening at the same time. So to me, it made sense to intertwine the two, and I realize for the reader that can be maybe a little confusing at first, but I'm hoping it sorts itself out pretty quick.
Well, no, I mean, it works pretty well after, almost immediately, actually. And when you say, it's interesting, the situation was when you came back from these places, you really weren't back, and that was the problem. You had, like flashbacks, but then let's say you're with your kid, as you write about it, you're with your wife, you're with your kids, you're going about your business, whatever that is, you're trying to figure that out here in the world. And but it's as if you're still there. So you're in two places at one time. You're two people at one time, and that's part of what you call the crazy, right?
It is, and I think that two people at one time is right. Like you're supposed to be this person in polite society. We're not supposed to talk about all of these things when you're hanging out at the hockey game or you're at some birthday party for your children or somebody else's. Mm-hmm. But inside. You're thinking about the war. You're thinking about your buddies who are still there, because of course, just because you came home doesn't mean that all of your friends didn't go back. Mm-hmm. And so, you're trying to be two people at once. And I should say, I didn't. It's not that I had flashbacks exactly in that. And what I mean by that is, I was never confused about reality. I knew where I was. Mm-hmm. I just knew that mentally. I couldn't be home without thinking about being there. And, of course, when I was there, all you're trying to do is live long enough to come home.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the tremendous irony of those things, isn't it? I mean,
right. And so you're just trying, no matter where you are is the wrong place. Mm-hmm. And you're either letting someone down or you're not living up to some obligation. When I was in country in Iraq, I wasn't being the husband or father I wanted to be, just because you're simply not there. Mm-hmm. You're just not present. And then when you come home, all your buddies are being shot at, and people are trying to kill them, and you're not doing what you should be doing to keep them alive. So
you carry around a constant sense of guilt and inadequacy then, right? I mean, and I should mention, of course, that part of the search in the book is to try to arrive at something that resembles stability, or to root yourself in one place and not be drifting back and forth all the time, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of putting it. To pick one route and stay there. I'm not sure I accomplished that in the book. I don't know if I've accomplished that in my life. But I've at least come to terms with a little bit more. But I didn't want to write a self-help book. I certainly don't think I wrote a happy book. I did, and you can too. Mm-hmm. Kind of book, because that's not how it felt. The book ends somewhat ambiguously because life is ambiguous. It moves on. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, to be specific about the kinds of things you're talking about, you mentioned a couple of things, like you're getting, maybe you're getting your kid ready for a hockey game or whatever you're doing, maybe cooking something or picking somebody up from school. But then you get in a situation like where, I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, you're in a supermarket, right? And maybe it's very, very crowded and you need to get out because you don't like to be trapped in a big crowd, because these are the kinds of things that happen to you. Like in Iraq, right? You go into a city or a town, and there's people all around you, any one of whom could be dangerous. You need to get out. So then you start thinking about, in a practical sort of trained way, who do you take out? Who do you kill? Which one do you get rid of? You could shoot this woman over here and maybe get out the door fast. So that kind of experience, right?
That's exactly right. And so when I say that it's not a flashback, it's not that I thought that I was suddenly surrounded by Iraqi women and men. It's that I was... my brain was thinking about Iraq and applying it to the situation here, like you say. So mm-hmm. The thing about, for example, getting my son ready for hockey is that you put, my son was playing goalie in one particular game. You dress a kid out in his goalie equipment in exactly the same order and in the same way as you do putting a guy in a bomb suit. You start with the legs and you move up to the chest and you put the helmet on last, and it's all the same. And so when I couldn't stand in a line in McDonald's or anywhere in this country without thinking that a line is a target.
People massed together in one place. Yeah.
Right. It's too many people, and the line's not moving. And or in the example that you gave of how do I need to escape from here, I think my situation or the bomb technician situation is maybe a little different in that we received a lot of tactical training, I'll call it, shooting, how to shoot and how to move. But our training really focused on escape. We're not there to kick the door down first.
Right.
On the raid, if we have to shoot our way out of a situation, it's because our security is dead and something really bad has happened.
Mm.
And so you're trained to, you and your two other bomb technicians on your team, how are we going to escape this crowded situation? And unfortunately, when you're standing in an airport, you don't have any security around. And so it starts to feel like not only are all the people there, but these, I didn't go anywhere without 12 infantry guys who are there to protect us, so that way we could take apart the bomb or investigate the car bomb or whatever the case.
And that they could also sort of watch the perimeter to see that you weren't going to get shot while you were doing it, right?
That's exactly right. They keep the crowd back. If somebody, when somebody starts shooting, they shoot back first. So that way, our job wasn't to shoot back then necessarily. Your job is to take apart the ID even faster so you can leave.
But so who keeps the crowd back at Toys R Us, right?
Well, exactly. There's nobody. There's just you, and so your brain starts to go through the cycle, like you say. Well, I'm now been. There are too many people around. Where's the exit? And how am I going to get out of here? And obviously, I mean, maybe I should go without saying, it's not like anybody was in danger being near me.
No.
The problem was it was a little bit more meta, I guess, or emotional. It was, what kind of person am I? What kind of person did the war make me? Well, the war made me the kind of person that stands in an airport and plans on who to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And normal, I'll put normal in finger quotes, I guess, normal people don't think like this. This was the conversation I was having with myself. What kind of person am I now?
Maybe this is a good point to go like your book does, to go back to another place in time, and then we can come forward again. Sure. I know people who came, I'm of the Vietnam generation, right? And I wasn't in the service and I wasn't in combat. So, but I had a lot of friends who were, and one or two actually very close friends, and they sort of didn't quite make it back in the right way either, right? And I had a friend who was in the 101st Airborne, and he was there for 2 tours, and he came back, and he kept to himself in his apartment, but he had like his apartment fixed up so if you made any noise in the hallway, he would know it quicker. I don't know, for some way, he didn't have his M16, but he had some kind of automatic weapon, and he spent constantly cleaning it, making sure it was working right. But the thing about him was, and I knew a guy who was his best friend when he was growing up, and I talked to that guy, and he said, he brought something over there. Now, you know what I mean? Here's the one you see what I'm driving at. In other words, some people go over to a place like World War II or Vietnam or Iraq or something, and they come back maybe with similar experiences, combat experiences, but they don't come back haunted in exactly the same way, maybe on a continuum. So I'm interested in sort of like how you grew up, like where you were born. Did you grow up in a place where there was a military tradition, patriotism, that kind of thing? Sure.
Yeah, I think your insight is right, or your buddy's insight is right, because I like the thing I like to say is every veteran fought their own war. Everybody's experience was different. Everybody's going to react to it a little bit differently. If you've met one veteran, you've met one veteran. We all did something different and processed it different. Funny enough, I grew up here in Buffalo, where I live now, in a very Catholic household, and my mother wouldn't let me play with guns as a kid because she's a pacifist and did not want toy guns in the house or me to watch violent movies or video games or any of that. And it was a bit of a shock when I wanted to join the military, but I applied for ROTC in 1994, and that's starting to feel like a long time ago now. That's almost 20 years, and a lot of things have happened. It's almost the military that I was hoping to join in 1994. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to work with NASA and go into space, and the Air Force seemed like a good way to do that. It was only after I got in the military that I realized that literally every male member of my family on both sides, except for my father, had military service. And you do mention that in the book, which is really a powerful thing. About you step foot in a combat zone, and you're almost interchangeable with them in other combat zones, right? Right, and that was an idea that I tried to explore, and it's not like we had family stories about this service. I had to go and do the research, and I eventually discovered that my great-great-grandfather was wounded at the Second Battle of Bull Run. He was in the 63rd Pennsylvania Volunteers. He was shot through the shoulder. I had no idea. I had no idea that was in my family. I found it, well, like I said, doing research and found this book written in 1912 about his unit, and just happened to find his name. So I didn't. Yeah, there is this continuum of service, and you start to wonder. Well, the way I put it in the book is, how many times have I landed on this beach or gotten off this plane or done this?
But your parents, anyhow, themselves, they did not bring you up in a super flag waving, got to join up, got to get them kind of family.
No, I would say the opposite. I was taught service was important. My grandfather that lived in Buffalo was a City of Buffalo firefighter, and between my Jesuit education and his example, and the fact that my parents were teachers, they definitely instilled this idea of service and not self-promotion or not, there's more important things in life than money and your job and all this, but I don't think they expected it to go in the direction of the military.
And why do you think it did?
Well, I can't blame it on the time and wanting to be an astronaut and everything else, because the truth is that by the time I got in, I could have chosen to get out a number of times, but I volunteered to go to EOD school, and I volunteered to work with explosives, and it was after 9/11. And I do think, 9/11 changed my thinking completely, changed my vision of what I wanted to do with my life, changed, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this with the 10-year Iraq War anniversary, that that day and the consequences of it in everybody's life, even if you weren't there, even if you don't know anybody that was killed or injured, just the left turn that my life made, where I was planning on doing a couple years in the military and get out, and then instead felt like I'm in the right job to be of service to my country at the right time.
Well, I mean, obviously it is a form of service, and some people could say, depending on the situation or, what's happening, it's the highest form of service because of what you might have to sacrifice. But why pick EOD in relation to anything else?
Well, I picked EOD because it was really hard, because I wanted the challenge. It wasn't an adrenaline thing for me necessarily, and I went to EOD school before the IED plague in Iraq began. I went to EOD school before we invaded Iraq, but after 9/11, and for me, it was the challenge that I knew that if I made it through school, I would have done something I could always be proud of. High school and college were relatively easy for me. I got good grades. I didn't have to work that hard. But EOD school, 30 of us started and 3 of us finished.
Well, I noticed electrical engineering, so maybe there's some technical interest there too.
Yeah, but I was a bad engineer.
All right. Okay.
I got the grades, but I never loved it. As it turned out, it ended up being really applicable to understanding how military ordnance and IEDs work.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that it wasn't the technical of, although EOD guys, it does tend to attract people who were tinkerers or like to work with their hands, because there is a lot of hands-on work, but also the guy who was bored in school and used to fool around at the back of the class because he just couldn't be bothered to do the homework because school came too easy to him. It attracts a lot of those type A, but slightly off, irreverent sort of people.
And then also, I mean, and as you mentioned before, everything's on a continuum, right? But then you don't want to put yourself in the class of people that's addicted to excitement and danger, but somewhere you needed some kind of challenge, obviously.
Right. And so for me, and honestly, for a lot, there's some EOD guys who are in it for the adrenaline rush, but I think that's really a very small percentage. Not that many of them used to make pipe bombs in their basement or something. It's mostly guys who want the challenge, and I think that did it for me. In my circumstances, having been in the military and looking for something that was more of a challenge, EOD was, I don't know. I guess I could have volunteered for, well, not for flight school. I can't see. My eyesight's bad. It's what kept me from actually volunteering to be an astronaut, I guess. Did
the people on your team know about that?
That I couldn't see?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's fine, actually. The only thing you can't be is colorblind.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because of the wires, right?
Glasses. Yeah. Yeah, you always have to cut the red wire, remember, so you have to know which one that is.
So maybe it would be useful to explain, as you do in great detail here, and sometimes in great gruesome detail, but it's tense every moment. And I have to say, once again, that this book is an incredibly tight, well-written book, and you do feel like you're there, and you do feel like the sweat and the fear and everything. You can actually feel it, so it's really, really well done. Maybe you could describe what your job was so people understand what you were doing over there.
Sure. It's, it used to be that the military bomb squad would focus mostly on military ordnance and duds, rockets that were fired and didn't go off. And there really weren't that many improvised explosive devices. But because of the nature of the past, 12 years of war and how much it's changed, on a good day, we would go after IEDs. And so we'd be based in, for example, in Kirkuk on my second tour. Somebody would find a bag that's suspicious or find a lump of dirt or something that looked wrong. It might be Iraqi police. It might be U.S. forces. They call us, and so we show up to take it apart and investigate with the robot, with our own explosives. The last thing that you possibly do is put on a bomb suit and walk down. That's the last resort after you've blown up your robot or broken a couple of robots or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best possible days are taking apart an IED before it detonates. Unfortunately, they're just hard to find, and if the bomber doesn't want you to find them, you're not going to before they go off. Or there's just a very small chance you're going to, statistically. And so we spent a lot of our time, especially in 05 and 06, 2005, 2006, doing post-blast investigations where the bomb has already gone off and you're trying to figure out what it was, how it worked, what the target was, why this car bomb in this place at this time. And you're gathering evidence, and the idea is that you gather enough evidence, and you don't have long. I mean, this isn't like the investigation going on in Boston right now where they can close an area for a couple days. You have 10 minutes because people are shooting at you while you're trying to...
And you're surrounded by people, and you're in the midst of, let's say, a marketplace or something, right?
Right, and there's a crowd around, and they don't even need to be hostile. They're just trying to get their friends to the hospital. They're trying to clean up the pieces and parts. They're trying to of people and things, So there's it's just a really tense, hostile, chaotic situation. You have a couple minutes to grab what you can, and then the idea is you get that evidence, and hopefully you get a fingerprint or a signature of the bomber. Maybe the guy always builds it the same way, and you eventually figure out who it is and stop them from building them. It took us a number of years to figure out that the guy putting the bomb out is not really the problem. There's lots of people putting bombs out, and they might be doing it. They might be true believers. They might hate Americans. They might hate a lot of things. Far more likely, they're poor and they need $10.
Oh, really? And someone who did make it and felt that way gave it to them to do it. Exactly.
And so there is an infinite number of people who will put a bag by the side of the road and not ask questions for $10. So getting rid of that person doesn't help. What you really need to do is find the very few people who know how to make it, and that's very challenging.
I was going to ask you, did that ever really happen very often?
It's what eventually happened in the surge in 07 and 08, which finally brought the IED violence down. But it took a while, and it took gathering evidence over a number of years, and it took the U.S. military learning how to do that. That was not a skill that we collectively had for a long time, and we had to learn it under the worst circumstances.
Was by the way, everybody, if you just tuned in and you're just catching the show, this is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Left 127, and we're talking to Brian Castner, Castner. The paperback edition of a book he wrote last year that was published last year is out, and it's called The Long Walk, a story of war and the life that follows, obviously available anywhere. So there you are doing these kinds of things over and over again. Now that you're back here and you're seeing what goes on, maybe we could talk about Boston a little bit later. Would you mind? I mean,
there's very little I can probably say, but I'm happy to answer.
Anything I can. Yeah, if it's something that you can't, then you can't. But back to what your experiences were. When you look over and you see, you came back several years ago. When you look over there and you see what's going on, there are still bombs going off all over the place. Do you feel like there's, aside from the fact that you probably still feel like you should be helping in some way, do you feel that there's any way that this could ever be prevented at all? I mean, I'm not want to get into a discussion of the human nature or warfare or tribal warfare or whatever, but I mean, this kind of thing seems to go on. I mean, you went over there and you did your job. The primary goal of what you were doing was to protect United States troops or just to protect everybody?
We saw it as protecting everybody. And that's, I have a hard time discussing this topic without getting into the human nature of war.
You know what? I only say that because sometimes people don't want to. I always want to. So feel free.
Okay. Well, I don't know how to describe what we were doing or say how to stop it without coming to terms with the fact that normal people are willing to do horrendous things to each other in horrendous circumstances. And what just the common man is capable of is one of those things that you learn in war. And it's not just them; it's us too. Mm-hmm. Or it's not just us; it's me. It's what it turns out. It's what's inside of you when people are trying to kill your friends, and of course they're trying to kill your friends because you're trying to kill their friends, and mm-hmm. It all round and round the mulberry bush we go. What could be done there? I'm fairly hopeless and cynical, so I'm not sure mm-hmm. If you're going to like my answer. But I feel like what actually happened in Iraq is not that the war ended, but that the U.S.'s involvement in it ended. Mm-hmm. And so the big question we always had in 2005 and 2006 was, what does victory look like? We didn't even know how to describe what a better situation would be, except that people would stop killing each other. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a good answer, but at least day to day, we felt like we didn't prioritize IEDs based upon whether the target was Iraqis or Americans. It's not like we left the ones at the Iraqi schools and only took apart the ones mm-hmm. that were targeting U.S. forces. Our job was to take them all apart, and so some little bit of you was hoping at the end of the day, maybe today Iraq was just a little bit safer because we don't discriminate. We're just trying to reduce the overall level of violence. Unfortunately, day to day, it didn't seem to get any better.
Yeah, when you look over there right now, I mean, is there maybe 3 days that go by when you don't pick up and you see some other horrible, explosion, car bomb, suicide bomb, whatever, even IED? But so here's the question then. My friend who came back from Vietnam, and I grew up in a generation where my father's generation, were all Depression and World War II guys. A lot of them in combat,
right? And
they had a certain attitude when they came home. And we didn't understand what it was when we were kids. How could they possibly explain what happened, right? Same situation, I suppose, if you're trying to explain, what you went through to some kid or to your own kid. We could sometimes, once in a while, there was like a big mouth who would go on and on and on because he won the Battle of Omaha. He won Omaha Beach all by himself. One of those,
Sure.
But
right.
Most guys just went about their business. They had a floor waxing business. They had laundry deliveries. They were truck drivers. They were cops. That's who lived in my neighborhood. And they went through all this amazing stuff. But they were tough, and they were practical, and they had a certain down-to-earth attitude. They didn't want to see violence again the rest of their lives, obviously. But
right.
They came back. But here's the question. My friend comes back from Vietnam, and a lot of people came back from Vietnam with this kind of peace missing, and they couldn't understand what the point of life was. They couldn't figure out what to do with themselves, who they were, what the point was. A lot of these guys in World War II didn't seem to have that problem. They went through horrendous stuff. But when they came back, they seemed to know what the point of their life was. And they seemed to think, and here's the question, or maybe it's a statement and you can comment. They seemed to think very clearly that they did the right thing and they actually achieved something. And there was a very, very good reason for them to go over there. I never got that impression from my friend from Vietnam. And I wonder about Iraq. Sorry, it's a long setup.
No, I think I'm sympathetic to it, and I agree with most of it. I think that there's, if you're looking for a why in there, just my opinion, because you'll find guys from Vietnam that won Khe Sanh by themselves, and you'll find guys from Iraq that, same in Muhammadiyah or wherever else. But I think for most of them, it's the ambiguity. It's the fact that there was no VE Day or VJ Day in Vietnam or Iraq, and the violence continues. We just left. And it's the nature of the conflict that there was no. We knew exactly what winning the war would mean in World War II, and then we did it. And maybe there was some.
So there's a resolution. There's a what's that word, closure, which I don't like, but it is true, right?
Right. Is that, and I think this is no small part of it. Honestly, they all went. They went with their unit. They stayed until their unit was done, and then they all came home. And in both Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan, guys go over for 1 tour, 2 tours, 3 tours, 6 tours. More guys are making a career of it than they used to, so more guys are going back over and over again. But there are plenty of guys like me who come home and the war continues, not just like in Iraq where there's still violence, but there's U.S. involvement still, and your friends are still going and you're not. And so the lack of a resolution is not this national issue. It's a personal issue. So So the point would be, I guess, if there was a resolution of the actual war where you risked your life and you actually killed people, or people were trying to kill you and you survived and your buddy survived, whatever. There's a resolution, a closure. The thing that you went to do is done. You come back and you go about your life. But when it doesn't happen, then is that part of what you keep calling it all the time? The crazy comes on you. The crazy is coming on me again. And is that a component of the crazy, that there was no closure? I think maybe not specifically the closure portion that we're talking about here from like a geopolitical standpoint. I never personally felt like, well, if there's a bomb going off in Baghdad right now, then I must have done something wrong. But lots of other aspects of it. The reason I came up with the name The Crazy is because I didn't have one word that would describe it. It wasn't just anxiety, and it wasn't just grief, and it wasn't just this loss of meaning, and it wasn't just panic. It was all these things plus more. But I think the part of it, the lack of closure, the part of it that's there is I don't know, whatever the word is, the word of seeing your friends go off and continue to risk their life and you stay home. Mm-hmm. However you sum that up best, I think that's part of it, is feeling like the feeling that you haven't done enough. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine this week, and I did 3 tours. He did 4 or 5 tours. He's been to Afghanistan and such. We've both gotten out, though. We're both done with our military service. We're watching Boston, and what we're feeling is, well, we should be doing something. Mm-hmm. That drive, that need for service that might have gotten you into the military to begin with, or got you to EOD school, it doesn't go away when you're done with your service, and people are still in need of your expertise, but instead of doing your part, you're sitting on your couch. Unless, of course, you found something else to do where you're constantly every day giving as much vital service as you can where you are currently, right? Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of ways to serve your country that have nothing to do with the military, AmeriCorps and Peace Corps and being a teacher in an inner city school. I mean, there's a million ways to do it. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll do a little bit of that with writing a book, but there's no, or writing more books, but there's no, that sense of accomplishment of this IED that was about to explode is now safe. Mm-hmm. There's immediate visceral feedback that you're doing something right. I guess part of this, too, and it's a question almost inevitably that I have to ask, because it's interesting in the book, of course, which makes it, the book was compared, and one of the critics compared it to, All Quiet on the Western Front, which is it's one of the most powerful books ever written about war, and certainly a lot of people call it an anti-war book. And it is because this common soldier, this kid, leaves school and goes into World War I on the German side,
And it's just about his experiences in the war. You know, this grunt-like misery and blood and mud. And in World War I, it's the famous example of, you know, you fight for a couple of months for about 30 feet of mud or something, and nobody gets anywhere. So, but your book is just, there's no politics in the book. The book is your experiences personally at home and your experiences personally over there in great detail. But there's nothing in the book, like there's nothing at All Quiet on the Western Front, that makes a statement, in other words. Like this is wrong, we shouldn't be here, whatever. You know what I mean? It just says it. But in All Quiet on the Western Front, he does wonder aloud what the point of this is. And is that in your book, do you think, or is that something that you feel or felt when you were there?
I did not dare ask myself the question, is this worth it?
Wow.
Because I think I was afraid of what the answer would be. And also, that is a very small voice in the back of your head, and there's a much larger voice in front that's saying, are all the explosives stowed for tomorrow? Has everybody cleaned their weapon? Is Tommy getting enough sleep? Has everybody been fed today? There's all these immediate concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't sit around at night and have political discussions because it's a cliche, but it's honestly true that the reason you keep going back or the reason that you fight really is for the guy next to you.
Mm-hmm.
And what is said in Washington by a Republican or a Democrat didn't matter. I think you ask is the question in the book. I think the closest I get to asking in the book is I say, the mission was to bring everybody home, and we brought everybody home. And the fact that we would have accomplished the same by never going in the first place, never occurred to me while I was there. It only occurred to me later.
Speaking of cliches, I mean, just to expand it, and your book does sort of finally at the end, what really seems to save you, and I presume it keeps saving you at this point, is the practice of yoga, and not just stretching out, with a mat, above some store, but actually the whole philosophy of it too, right?
Yes, and thank you for understanding the difference. I don't. Organized stretching doesn't do much for me, but yoga does, and it's the philosophy of it and the idea of letting go of. I'm going to start to sound self-helpy to myself, and I don't particularly like it, but it's true that the letting go of your own judgments and letting go of what you wanted and more accepting of who you are and being present in that moment really did work for me. I think it was a combination. My psychologist helped too. And I think and running helped, and
lots of talk about running in the book. That was
right, because it exhausts you enough that you don't. There's no room for feeling crazy when you hurt as much as you do after 10 miles of running. So,
but then in the end, of course, you discover that you can't outrun it. So there's other things that have to be. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You eventually need to confront, but I think if there's a way to confront it, it's this that. My psychologist eventually convinced me that all of this anxiety, or a lot of anxiety, is about the future, and so it's not so much about the kind of person I was afraid I was, or the grief, or whatever else. It's fear of what the future holds. Yoga teaches you to let go of everything, including the future.
It's I guess it's such an ancient Hindu practice. I mean, it's what Buddhism is based on. It's the whole idea of everything is impermanent, right? So why hold on to anything?
Right, and I don't know. It amazed me. I was not, like I said, I grew up a good Catholic boy in Buffalo, so yoga was not necessarily the first thing I was going to latch onto. But I needed to explain. The book is really me explaining the war to myself. What did I do, and why did I do it, and what did it make me? But I think part of that was this need to explain. What's yoga all about? How should I be able to stand in these particular positions and feel better, in my head and in my gut and in my chest? Why should these things be connected? And I don't know. I'm still learning that answer. I think at first it's just because it's hard, because you need to spend so much time thinking about it. But even once you get into that flow, your mind still wanders. And for me, anyway, it wanders away from the worst of the crazy part.
Speaking of yoga and speaking of personal, survival, and and the position that you're in, let's say right now, where do you stand now? And I don't mean that in a yoga way.
Right.
But, I mean, I finished reading this book. Now, I know a little bit, I can't in no way compare myself to your experience, because I've never been in combat, never been in the service, but I've been through a lot that's pretty rough, and have had similar sorts of experiences in terms of am I really here, or how many of me are here, or where am I now? And I understand this. I sympathize with this kind of thing. And here's what happened with me. I got into telling personal stories, like autobiographical stories, on the stage and on the radio about the worst things that happened to me in life. And some of them were pretty bad, right? Traumatic things. And I thought when I was doing this, I was in my 30s, that when I got through with this, I had this tremendous rush and this feeling of confession. The whole world heard it. I unburdened myself. And I felt like, that's it. I've cleansed myself. And then I discovered later on that I really hadn't. And it took me a long time to figure out that it was everything I did every day, that really did it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I know I do. And again, I hesitate to get too self-helping. I wonder if the other foot's going to drop. But I think the part that I didn't, you leave a lot out of a book. To try to have some sort of focus narrative, and one, to have a storyline that makes sense. And so obviously I continue to think about things and get better after the arbitrary point at which I stopped telling the story. And one of them is that once you come to terms with the kind of person you are, maybe, then you need to reconstruct your life. And like you say, what am I going to do every day to be the person I'd rather be? If I don't want to be the person that picks people to kill in the airport,
yeah,
what kind of person am I going to be instead? And kind of construct that. The funny thing though is you mentioned about it. It's confessional, and I get it all out.
Well, I don't. You know what? I don't want to use that word, because I think that's almost a pejorative sometimes. I don't see it as confessional. I think you were just telling your story, and like you say, to yourself as much as anybody.
Right. And I don't think my grandfather from World War II could have written my book. I mean, I think that just if there's been one benefit of reality TV, it's that you're allowed to say these things out loud. In a way that maybe you couldn't before. It just wouldn't have been socially acceptable. Now, I mentioned in the very beginning of this show that it's not in polite company at a hockey game. You don't talk about whatever last incident you went on with pieces of blown up people and whatever else. So there are definite lines, but in a book, you can put it out there and. I don't know. I didn't think it was going to be therapeutic or cathartic necessarily.
Oh, so you didn't go into it with that feeling?
No, I just needed. I don't know if I examined it that much. I just needed to get it out, but definitely the trying to put it. I think I could have had as much therapeutic value writing little notes for myself that I would have taken into the psychologist.
Right.
I was trying to construct a narrative, and I was trying to write a good book. I was trying to try my hardest at writing a good book.
Well, and you did, and also I guess it's a feeling like it would be a good idea for the world to know what really went on there, right?
Yes, and but I also, I never expected any of this to happen. I thought I thought I was going to self-publish it or print out one copy and give it to my kids, and I wasn't writing a book for the world. I wasn't writing hey, everybody needs to know what really happens to us sort of thing. I was just trying to, I was trying to explain it and tell a story, but in maybe a lot of ways the audience was me. And instead it's turned into, instead I'm talking to you.
Yeah, well, but I think maybe you learned that from studying yoga, and I've learned that myself from studying Buddhism, that when you're talking to yourself, you are talking to everybody, and when you're talking to everybody, you are talking to yourself, right?
Yes, there is. Yeah, without getting too metaphysical, I think you're exactly right.
Well, I guess that's. I don't want to keep you on forever here, and we should move on. Maybe take some calls, and we certainly have to do a commercial. It's a commercial radio station, so. I guess the final irony is, and the truth of it all is, you said that the big thing over there was to make sure, and you said it was a cliche, but it's true, that make sure your buddy is okay. And in the end, isn't that what the mission is here?
When you say mission is here,
when you're talking about, you brought up this tradition of service. I mean, really, that I come to the conclusion at the end of my life here, or near the end of it, that is what it's all about, is making sure your buddy is okay.
Yes, and it has. It's. I mean, we spent a lot of time last 40-something minutes talking about all of the bad things that happen in war. I don't know if the camaraderie, the love, and that's not too strong a word, the love between the men and women who do this. Combat is an extraordinarily intimate act. The things that you share with these people, these life and death situations that you share, and the bind that you get from it. I wouldn't trade it. I don't regret what happened, and if it taught me to really see the world in a much more communal and interconnected way, well, I mean, it's a hell of a way to learn how to do that. But
it was your way. So, all right, thank you very much for coming on, and it's really quite some book. So, everybody listening, you should get a copy of this book, The Long Walk: A Story of War and the Life That Follows. Thanks for staying on so long.
Well, thank you. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, same here. Okay, thanks. Let us go to a commercial, and then we'll come back. And don't forget, after 6 o'clock news, we're going to talk about what happened in Boston, and I'll have some things to say, and I hope that you'll have some things to say, too. Well, obviously, it's too late to take calls. I just got carried away with that conversation with Mr. Kastner, and it was very nice of him to be on for so long. He's probably had hundreds of interviews by this time. This book is reviewed by the Times, the New Yorker, and every other newspaper, and he's been on NPR, Fresh Air, and everything. So it's really some book. And in the book, there is no declaration of political purpose. There is no condemning the war. There is no questioning the war even. And you can hear from the man's talking that he had his questions, and that he's obviously very intelligent, and he sees the spiritual side of things, and he asks himself what the purpose of himself is, and the purpose of his actions in the world, and at large with the rest of the reactions in the world. We didn't get to talk about Boston with him. Maybe we didn't need to do that. I mean, he could have explained to me exactly what kind of bomb it was or how it was made, that he's seen them before. He could explain to me this, that, and the other thing, but it wouldn't have gotten us any closer to some of maybe the deeper issues of what happened up in Boston and what needs to happen now. And this is one of those books. There's another one that was written about Vietnam called Matterhorn, which is also a staggeringly good book, Matterhorn, Matterhorn. And it doesn't condemn, it doesn't question, and that's one kind of war book. There's different kinds of war book. Probably the best book I ever read, since I wasn't in this war, about Vietnam and the whole time of Vietnam, the whole era, not alone just the war itself, and about America, is Tree of Smoke, which is probably one of the best books I've ever read, by Dennis Johnson. Matterhorn, I don't remember the name of the author, but it's about his experiences, I think, as a Marine in Vietnam. And he doesn't make judgments the same way in this book, and it makes the book all the more powerful. You could bring, as I do have, and as you have, you can bring your judgments to the book. And my question to him was, what was the purpose over there? I mean, you come back here from an experience like that, and you feel crazy. You can't get used to life here. But you don't have any reason to believe that for the years that you were over in this place, in a state of tremendous terror all the time, or rage, or whatever it was, people trying to kill you, you're trying to kill other people, trying to survive, trying to get back here. When you come back from a place like that, you might very well want to think to yourself, well, at least I achieved this or that. Or at least I went over there for a really good reason. It was essential for me to go to Iraq or to go to Vietnam. I went through all that mud and blood for a really good reason, because I was saving those people's lives. I was establishing a democracy. I was fighting clear, out and out evil. We were good, they were bad. And of course, things don't ever break down like that. but the people who were in World War II, who I knew, that were my whole parents' generation, a lot of them were, nuts from the war, and a lot of them were hard cases. They would hit you. They would drink too much. They would turn violent. A lot of them, and that was an era when people didn't talk about things, as Mr. Kastner so aptly remarked. It wasn't a time in those days when men talked about how they felt about anything. But one thing that they came back with was a sense, for all the reasons historically and truly, that they went over there to fight a clear evil. They conquered it. They established a democracy, which is flourishing to this day, and they came home. And that's what they achieved. That's what they risked their lives for. That's what a lot of people lost their lives for. This is not true about Vietnam and Iraq. And I think that's one of the reasons why you got so many people coming back from these places who are crazy and violent and suicidal and miserable, because they don't have that feeling that something was changed and it was done for the good. Because most people want to do good. They want to be good to other people. That's not what happened over there, and it's not in Iraq and in Vietnam, and it's not what's happening in Afghanistan, and that is part of the problem. That's it. That's all I got to say this hour. We'll be back after the 6 o'clock news, and we'll talk about what happened in Boston. Okay, we're back. This is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Left 127. It's very difficult to even know where to start with what happened in Boston. One thing right away is if you've been through this experience before, and I mean, once again, if there's all levels of being through this experience. If you're physically right on the spot, that's a whole different world. But if you're in the same city when something like this happens, or if somebody you know or people you know have had losses or have their lives damaged, even permanently damaged by such things, then maybe you could relate to it a little bit. I mean, after all, I was in Manhattan on the morning of 9/11. My son's school, he was going to high school 5 blocks from where the towers were, and saw things out the window of his high school at the top of the World Trade Center. He saw smoke and he saw other things. We didn't even know where he was or if he was alive, until he showed up back home a couple hours later. He had to walk several miles to get back home, and he had some dust on him. God knows what was in the dust. On the block I lived, and still live, there were people. There was a guy in his 30s, had 2 little kids, and lost his wife. She was in the tower, and everybody sort of knew somebody or knew somebody who knew somebody, and you were terrified and everything. And I've thought about this before and talked about this before. Wars in foreign places, explosions, disasters like the one in Texas that happened, this huge explosion when ultimately they're going to find out probably that 70 people or more have been killed by this. The distance means something. The further away you are from something, no matter how horrendous and horrible it is, the less you feel it. It's sort of like human nature. If you have a husband, a son, a brother, mother, father, child, if you have somebody or a friend that's there, that gets hurt over there, or that's right in the place, then you're closer. But if you're far away and you don't have any relatives or friends there, then you feel it. But the feelings you have clearly can't be as personal. There's an earthquake in China, which there was just the other day, or there is an explosion someplace, or a ship goes down off the coast of someplace. It's a horrible thing. Or there is a flood and thousands of people die. And now we've got television, of course. So that sort of connects us closer to the horror of things and to the immediacy of the experiences, right? And so you feel it more because you can see other human beings in live time suffering as it used to be. For instance, I used to buy and sell old books. And one of the things I had in my store, because I was fascinated by them all the time, were old newspapers. And I love to read old newspapers. If you want to learn American history, one of the best ways to do it is to find volumes or even single copies, which don't really exist so much anymore, of old newspapers from 1810 or 1860 during the Civil War. I have or had many copies of the New York Times from various dates, day after day, during the Civil War. Or if you want to understand what happened in the 1890s. Now, of course, when it was happening, people had that tunnel vision. You know, they didn't see the larger thing. They didn't know what was really happening. Later on, historians do research and they find out more about it. They see motives. They know things that people didn't even know then. But it's fascinating to read about this kind of stuff, right? But in those days, if something awful happened, if a steamship sunk and 150 people were drowned, let's say on a river, or if there was, and in New Orleans, it used to happen every 30, 40, 80 years, if there was a big storm and a flood and the city was flooded, or if there was a big battle somewhere in the Civil War, you can only read about it in the newspaper, or somebody might write a letter to you way after the fact. So you learn about this days later, or sometimes you learn about it. You know, they had the telegraph. Samuel Morse invented the telegraph. What was it, 1840 something? People got the news right away, and then the news would publish in the newspaper. So there was a big battle at Shiloh or someplace, you know, or at Gettysburg. You would get the news, and the reporters would be there, and they would write the information down. But there's no TV. There's no video. There's no radio. There's nobody on the scene. You don't hear actual sounds of battle. You don't see things. So you're getting things secondhand. You're getting it from, you're getting it days, weeks, or even months later. And of course, the effect on you is less, of course, unless, of course, you had a relative or a friend who was there. But now, when something happens, you see it immediately. There are cameras, sort of bouncing around on the backs of trucks or in helicopters, news cameras. People are running and screaming. You see explosions. You see planes hitting buildings over and over again in live time. Or you see, you see explosions in live time. And people all have got their little video cameras on their phones now, and they're posting things instantly. They're tweeting things. They're putting things online. So you see things immediately, and you hear people scream. You see people being pepper sprayed, beat up. You see people being run over. You see all of these things happening in live time, and it has a visceral effect. So it's a little different than it used to be. Maybe it's a lot different than it used to be. Nevertheless, I think that rule, that emotional rule, still applies. If you're not right there, the further you are away, the less you feel it. But still, you feel it for another reason. When you read about this, and of course, it also has to do with people who are, let's say, like you. In other words, I don't know if this is really something that I'm feeling myself, or whether other people will agree with this or not. When you see other people who are very different than you, they're a different color, a different religion, they have a whole different ethic, they have a different language, they live in a place where things don't even look the same, you identify with your own tribe of people, with your own type of people. I think, and this is maybe it's something that we can evolve out of. People are just people, and I think it's something we should evolve out of. It's what happens to anybody, no matter what religion or language or color or or whoever they are, wherever they are. It's the same as if it's happening to you. But still, it's human nature, it seems, the way things are now. Until we grow up a little bit as a species, or humanity gets more mature or civilized, you sort of feel it. So what happens in Boston is, or what happens in 9/11, or what happened in Texas is, you feel it more because it's people who are Americans, who are very much like you, who generally speak the same language, who generally act and talk the same way. They're interested in their flat screen TVs or their jobs, or they're passionate about hockey or basketball or baseball, or they voted a certain way, or they're in a political party. We all speak sort of metaphorically the same language. We have a similar culture to share. And of course, if it happens in our country, and I'm not talking about patriotism now, because that's the least of anything, right? If it happens in your country, I mean, the world is divided into sections, and that's also the way human beings are too. We are sort of turf animals. We have, and I've talked about this before, there are actually scientific studies to show that there is an actual number. The number of 150 people. I don't know how they came up with this. The number of 150 people seems to be the number of people that can form a cohesive group that can actually function correctly with the feeling of each individual that they have some control or participation in this group. Once it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, and you've got a country, a huge country, the feelings and the connections get lost, right? The feelings and the connections get lost. But still, something happens. I'm in Manhattan, and I'm, 122 blocks or whatever, 5 miles away from a gigantic attack, where buildings come crashing down and planes fly into these buildings, and there are explosions, and who knows what happened. To this day, we'll never know, possibly. You feel it. And then, of course, my son is 5 blocks away. I know other people who work down there. A friend of mine was about 10 blocks from the scene, and his business disappeared. He worked at a music studio. The studio had to close because the area was roped off, and there was so much debris and dust and the smell and everything. The clients wouldn't even come down to that area of the city anymore, so they had to move their studio, and his business sort of disappeared on him. Eventually wound up in New Jersey, and he started working there again. So the closer you are, the more you feel it. It happened in Boston. It could happen in Cleveland. It could happen in, and it has happened. It happened in Oklahoma City, where some lunatic, this time a homegrown white Christian lunatic, blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City in 1995, I think it was. And 168 people were killed, and hundreds more were wounded or disabled or traumatized in ways that most of them probably never got over. You feel these things because it's your country. It's your place. People are turf. They're a cave. They're neighborhood people, right? You're concerned about what happens. If something happens around the corner from where you live, if something happens down the block or 10 blocks away, or something happens in the town hall where you live, it affects you more than if it happened in the next town or in a neighborhood 8 miles away or something like that. And that's how we are. But that's the initial feeling. The larger feeling is that what happened in Boston, naturally happens to all of us. What happened there happened to all of us. And like I said, there's so much involved here that it's hard to cover it all, which is, but I'll mention a few things. And then what I'm hoping is, after a little while, because my voice is a little rough today, I have a sore throat, that you will call up and give me your opinions. And I don't mind, anything from the utmost conspiracy, which, by the way, I don't have contempt for conspiracy theories. No more. I've lived in this country long enough. I've seen enough manipulation, and we've learned enough about what our government is capable of, or what any government is capable of, not to really believe much of what they say. And anybody who really does believe much of what the authorities say, or the police, or the FBI, certainly the president, I mean, he's the last person you need to believe. Look at the way he acts, and look what they do in secret. So anybody who wants to call up about any kind of opinion, if you want to talk about, who did it, why they did it, what it means, what we should do about it, who's at fault, who's to blame, all that kind of stuff, feel free. If I think that your opinion is getting a little too, I wouldn't say off the deep end, but if it's not really universal enough, if I think that you're dwelling on details too much, or I find it just too boring, then we'll just move on and take another call. But here's other issues to consider, or when you call up. Let me cover the idea of government conspiracies. One of the saddest things is when you see something like this happen, and when you hear that it happened, and when I first read it, and you hear there's an explosion, and you hear clearly, then you see that it was a planned attack, that it was a bomb that went off. It wasn't an accident. A boiler didn't explode. It wasn't a gasoline truck. It wasn't something like that. It was an attack. And when you think of something like that, the first thing you think of is these days, because after 9/11 and these two horrible wars that we're involved in here, you think to yourself, who did this? Who is behind this? Because after what happened at 9/11, don't forget, I come from a generation. I was 18 years old when Kennedy was shot, and nobody has ever solved that one, and probably nobody ever will. You could just say it was simply what it was. Some crazy, misguided lunatic who had been disturbed and troubled his whole life, Mr. Oswald, just decided that that's what he was going to do. He lived in Russia for a while. This all, you know his life story, or you don't. But he decided that he was going to murder the president, and that would solve all sorts of important political, social, and economic problems. And we're not even talking about his psychological problems. Well, I don't know how many people believe that he was just the one person. Most people seem to believe and seem to understand from the facts and from what was going on that there was more than one person involved. In fact, a lot of people believe, with very good reason, by the way, if you look back at history, and then especially if you look back at what any government is capable of doing to advance its own self-described important causes or policies. If you look back at what happened with Kennedy, there is every reason to believe that it was possibly the CIA and or the mafia that had him assassinated. They hated that guy for all sorts of reasons, and I'm not going to teach a long history course here, but they hated him, and they wanted him dead. They wanted him out of the way. It was revenge, and they wanted to replace him with somebody who wouldn't be so accommodating. The worst thing that Kennedy wanted to do, according to a lot of people, was to actually have some real détente with the Russians. But there's a lot of reasons why they hated him. Bottom line is, it's not so difficult to me. And then, of course, there's 9/11, where to this day, there are tremendous arguments, some with a lot of facts on their side. It seems to me, if you look at it objectively, that it could possibly have been, and this is unimaginable to a lot of people. Some people, they laugh this off. They have contempt for even hearing a thing like this. There are a lot of people who believe that it was. Now look at what happened afterwards. You got Cheney and you got Bush and you got that whole cabal of oil people who are totally unscrupulous, have no morals, or are stupid or insane, or all three. And they decided they want to invade Iraq. And they're going to go after Osama bin Laden, of course, because theoretically he's the one that did it. Well, maybe he did do it. But what they really wanted to do was invade Iraq. That becomes evident after you look at the whole thing. After invading Afghanistan to go after the bad guy, like in any old Western or crime drama, they mysteriously and abruptly shift their entire war focus over to a country that had nothing to do with the attacks on the United States. Now, we already invaded that place once before. Not invaded. We already beat them out of Kuwait and beat them back from Kuwait. In 1991, Bush's father did that. The attack in Iraq, a lot of people, Greg Palast, who was on this show, have demonstrated to my satisfaction that the attack in Iraq was not to get their oil. A lot of people think, oh, yeah, we wanted their oil, and that's why they did it. In fact, according to Greg Palast, what we wanted to do was we wanted to suppress the production of oil. And this is how he reasons it out. And Palast is smart and knows this stuff. That Saddam Hussein was threatening to flood the world with cheap oil and bring down the prices of Saudi oil and American oil companies so low that their profits would go down. And there is nothing worse or more evil to an executive at an oil company, or to the owner of an oil company, or to somebody who has most of their money in oil, who is rich from it, like the Bushes, like Saudi princes, all these people, corporate executives at ExxonMobil, Chevron, wherever. Nothing could be worse than for the price of oil to plummet. And what was really happening was that Saddam Hussein, right around the time in the last year or two before his country was invaded by the U.S. by George Bush Jr., he threatened a very real threat to these people, not to the rest of us who would benefit by a lower oil and gasoline price. God forbid, that the people of most countries would benefit, people of the United States. He threatened to start jacking up production so high in Iraq, which had the second largest reserves of oil than anybody knew at the time, that he would lower the price of oil so dramatically that it would cut the profits or almost eliminate the profits of most regular oil companies. And they couldn't have that. And so for that reason and other reasons, George Bush wanted to get revenge for his father. Maybe he wanted to revenge on his father. He wanted to show Dad that he wasn't really the wimp and the idiot that everybody thought he was. And of course, in the process, he proved that he really is the wimp and the idiot that everybody thinks he is. However, so the government lies to us. It lies to us, to our faces. It lies to the UN. Powell, Condoleezza Rice, George Bush, Dick Cheney, they manipulate information. They suppress things that other people should know. They find out that they're wrong about things, and they go ahead anyhow and launch an invasion and change the course of the whole world for the worse. Several 100,000 people, including Americans, but mostly Iraqis, have been turned into refugees, plain murdered, raped, wounded, lost their entire culture and their country. I am not defending a monster dictator like Saddam Hussein. I'm just saying that as a result of this lying bullshit, of this incredible crime for which Cheney and Bush and Rice and Powell should be spending the rest of their lives in jail at hard labor, for this incredible crime, which has caused not just innumerable amounts of deaths and disablings, but suffering and refugees and destruction beyond imagining. And it has also destroyed the United States economy. It's contributed to destroying the United States economy. You cannot spend $1 trillion on a war in a place and then lower taxes at the same time without destroying an economy. And that's what Bush and these people did. So they needed a reason to have a war over there. They needed a reason to go after Saddam Hussein. And what better reason than to team up? And when I say team up, I don't mean this literally, but to find a guy who is just as crazy as them, who's already attacked U.S. ships. He's blown up embassies all over the place. That's Osama bin Laden, an insane fundamentalist murderer over there, right? Who is almost like the mirror image of George Bush and Dick Cheney. If George Bush and Dick Cheney could be melded into one person, and I know you might be near eating, and I don't want you to think about that, but let's say they became one person, a fundamentalist Christian, or somebody who believes he is, that's George Bush, but he's about as Christian as the devil, a fundamentalist Christian and a cynical, amoral monster like Cheney who would do anything for money and power, put them together, and you've got Osama bin Laden. They are mirror images of each other. So they see this guy who's already attacked American shipping. He's blown a hole in the USS Cole and killed like 47 people. He's blown up embassies in different places, responsible for attacks on America overseas. And he's putting together a plot which was pretty well discovered by people at the FBI. I've had Colleen Rowley on here, who was an FBI agent, who personally saw information that made her sure that Saudis were learning how to fly jets as a plot from Osama bin Laden to attack the World Trade Center or buildings or cities in this country. So she brings this information to her superiors. They get concerned. They bring it to their superiors. Suddenly, they're told to just stop, that they're wrong, that maybe that's not that serious. Bush even hears about it in August of 2001 and says, okay, he says to the guy who brings him this information, you've covered your ass. Let's not worry about it. In other words, there's every reason to think, because it's been done before in history by other dictators and other leaders of countries, even democratic leaders. If you want a war, you have to have what the old Roman term is called casus or casus belli, a reason. You have to have a cause for a war. Well, for instance, there's a lot of people, there's dozens and dozens of books, and I'm not saying I agree with this, that say that Roosevelt, that FDR, was extremely well aware from intelligence sources that the Japanese were probably going to attack American military bases, but they also thought that he would attack Pearl Harbor. And there are people who claim, and I'm not endorsing this, that FDR said, who is desperately looking for a reason to go to war with Nazi Germany and the Japanese Empire, who were allies, that what he needed was for them to attack us first, because America was very isolationist and did not have a tradition of attacking large, especially European countries. You know, after all, that's where we came from. They're not gooks. They're like us. You know, we have to be polite to them. We can't just attack them. So even though we're attacking Britain, right? So Roosevelt is desperate for a way to get us into the war, but doesn't want to look like the aggressor and launch an invasion on Japan, or actually engage in hostilities, or, you know, official hostilities with Germany. There are people who say he allowed that to happen. Who knows? Hitler himself, when he wanted to have a war with Poland, when he wanted to invade Poland, he or had commissioned or he ordered German soldiers or German undercover operatives to kill Polish people and dress them in Polish army uniforms, or to kill Polish soldiers over on the border there with Germany and Poland, and drag their bodies with their weapons over into Germany and say that there was a big battle and we had to go in there. The Gulf of Tonkin in 1964, which was used as an excuse for Johnson to go to the Congress and say that we need to invade Vietnam because the evil communists who are going to take over the whole world and keep, my friends from making $5 billion a year, which is a really bad thing, they have just attacked us. The evil communists, the Vietnamese have attacked us. What happened was they claimed that a bunch of speedboats, that small sort of PT boats from gunboats from World War II, PT boats, torpedo boats, ships with like 50 caliber machine guns and small cannon. That a couple of these boats attacked U.S. ships in the Gulf of Tonkin. You might ask yourself, if you had a clear head, what the fuck we were doing in the Gulf of Tonkin in the first place? We don't live there. It's not our country. We hardly even trade with these people. We wanted a war. I say we, they wanted a war. And that's important because there's you and me and everybody regular people who work and want to be good to each other and understand that we're all in the same boat, mostly decent people. And then there's them. And I don't want to make too distinct a division because we're all related to each other, right? But there are people in the world, psychopaths, power-hungry maniacs, people to whom money is more important than anything, right? They wanted this war. And so the president goes and says that these gunboats attacked our ships. Even if they did, and nobody knows for sure really if they did, maybe sailors on the spot know. Even if they did do that, so what? First of all, we shouldn't have been there in the first place. It was a threat and a provocation, right? And really, we were looking for an excuse for a war, a way for the CIA, and had been there for years already. We had already been giving advice and information and weapons to the French before they got their asses kicked out of Indochina, thank God, in 1956. And, we already had operatives there. We had people there in the late 50s and the early 60s. Everybody's agitating for a war, which we didn't know about, of course. Nobody ever heard of Vietnam until 1964. Nobody in this country ever heard of Vietnam except the people who wanted to have a war with it. They knew about it, but we didn't know about it, right? Suddenly, they're a big evil enemy when all they were doing is trying to have a revolution where they would have their own country back and they wouldn't be still a leftover colonial power backed by the most corrupt people in the world. So this is what they wanted. Meanwhile, so they got their war, but the president Johnson either lied about it or he used a flimsy excuse for no good reason to get us to a war where we didn't belong with people who we really had no business having a war with. And this has happened over and over again in history, that governments will create horrendous scenes and allow thousands, hundreds or thousands of their own citizens, soldiers sometimes, civilians sometimes, to be killed, or they will kill them themselves to say, look what they did. Hitler himself started a fire. The Nazis started a fire in the Parliament building in Germany and claimed that the communists did it and used that as an excuse to even have even more draconian laws and finally have a dictatorship completely. This is what goes on in the world. So when the authorities tell us what happened in Boston, and a lot of people like Alex Jones on the radio and on the internet, and a lot of other people, and some of you perhaps wonder, are they lying to us again? Because they lie to us over and over again. This is not paranoia. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. I don't spend my time doing this all the time. But they lied to us about what happened in Iraq and why we were going to war with them. I don't know whether they lied about 9/11. Would I be shocked to find out that Cheney and the CIA and all sorts of other people set explosions up in those buildings? No, I wouldn't. I'm not going to indulge in a long conversation here because the main reason is because nobody's ever going to catch these people and nobody's ever going to put the bad guys in jail. So I don't want to get into a long conversation about it. But let me just say that I wouldn't be shocked by it. We were lied to about everything. We're being lied to right now. When Brennan and Obama tell us that, and the CIA and whoever else it is, tells us that that they weren't responsible. This happens like every month. Oh, it wasn't their fault that there wasn't an airstrike in Afghanistan that killed a whole funeral party or a wedding party of 32 innocent people. That never happened. Then it turns out that the UN or somebody else investigates, and it did happen. Or it happened worse than anybody even thought it happened. Or that a drone strike was launched against the house where a Taliban commander was supposed to be. This is 2 weeks ago. And 13 children were killed. The president has repeatedly, it's turned out, and Brennan, lied to our faces, right to us on news conferences and in press conferences. They have lied to us about what goes on everywhere all the time. And if they don't lie directly, they lie by omission by not telling you about the tens of billions of dollars that they're spending, clearly, when it's unearthed by reporters who have the guts to do it, on spying on us, on everything else. So this is one side of it, right? The other side is that these guys turn out to be from a family that was originally from Chechnya, one of the craziest, most violent places on the face of the earth for the last 2,000 years. A crazy place. I mean, where rape, murder, violence. One of the brothers that was killed, the older brother is named Tamerlan. Tamerlan is his first name. That is after one of the most famous butchers, one of the most notorious killers in the history of humanity, a man that's known in the West as Tamerlane, who lived in the 14th century. This guy tried almost to conquer the entire earth, just like Genghis Khan, only 10 times worse. Tamerlane, who was a Muslim, who came from that area of the world, led armies, vast armies, and attacked in Africa, in southeastern Asia, in India, all the way up into the Caucasus, all the way into Western Europe. This guy, and this is according to, I'm getting my information from Wikipedia here, and I've learned this from other places too. This guy and his armies, in his pursuit of dominance and power and grabbing up every resource there was on earth and enslaving people and converting them to Islam, killed, now listen to this, 5% of the population of the planet before he died. He killed something like 50 million people, and that is in the 1400s, in the 1300s, in the 1407 or something. He killed 5% of the population of the known population of the earth by warfare and murder and starvation and the misery he brought. There are people, this is who this guy's named after, right? I bring this up to say that I think it would be a really good idea. We're looking for solutions. How do we stop this cycle of violence, this endless cycle of violence? You do this to me, I'm going to do this to you. In the 1920s and 30s, I forget when it was, there was a time in Italy in the 20th century when they had vendettas for a couple of hundred years, vendettas where men would shoot each other over borders of their farm, or an insult in a cafe, these macho assholes, right? And their mustaches would bristle, and then take out a shotgun or a pistol and blow somebody's brains out or shoot them through the heart. Well, then the other family was honor bound. The word honor is a much sullied word. They were honor bound to revenge themselves. They didn't kill women and children. The men killed each other. There was a point in the 20s and 30s in Sicily where there were almost no men. They couldn't work the farms. The shops couldn't even be maintained. There was 100 women to one man. The women all wore black all the time in mourning. The cycle of violence and murder. You did this to us, we're going to do this to you. Look at the Israelis and the Palestinians. And look at the Serbs and the Bosnians. Look at the Americans now and the whole world. We've attacked the whole world. Well, is it any wonder that the whole world wants to attack us? What you do, what you say in the world, comes back to you. You know that old phrase? First time I ever heard this, I guess because this is not a phrase. I grew up with all kinds of folk phrases, mostly with Jewish, where I grew up, Yiddish. But I was working in an office as a probation officer when I was about 28 years old. And I had never heard this phrase before, because it sounds stupid if you grew up with this phrase, right? I was talking about something that this guy did, this criminal I was investigating, right? And he had done something to his wife, and he beat her and beat her and beat her. And one time, She said she had enough of it. She takes a broken bottle, stabs him in the guts, and kills him. And she was the case I had, whether or not to put her in jail. That's another whole story I can tell you sometime. And I'm talking to one of the secretaries there, this black woman who lives out in the same neighborhood where this woman was from. And I talk about how this guy beat her up. And then she's, finally, for years, she sticks a broken bottle in him and ends his nasty life. And she says, well, what goes around comes around. I never heard that before. I never heard that before. I remember when I was younger, the first time I ever saw this was my synagogue used to have days when it was the city of New York would give a license to a church or a synagogue to have gambling to raise money for the synagogue or the church, right? And then one of the things they had was these big wheels. These big wheels that go around and they make that noise, and then you put your money down on 3, 6, or 9, and there's numbers on the wheel, 3, 6, or 9, and they spin the wheel. And it goes around and around and around, and the rubber thing goes, and it stops, right? And you're sitting there with your breath in your mouth, right? And I'm thinking to myself, as soon as she said this, yeah, what goes around comes around. It's called karma. The Hindus came up with it 5,000 years ago, and the Buddhists refined it. What you do to people comes back at you. What you do to people comes back at you. So that innocent people in Boston, people who never hurt anybody, possibly, people who were decent people, spend their whole lives trying to be good to each other and live their lives and work for a living in this awful, hard world, they have their lives ruined. They are either killed or they have no legs or they have no arm or they're blind or whatever it is, and their lives are ruined. Now, if I was there and I had my daughter there who was 10 years old, who was the love of my life, the light of my life, let's say, and I'm there with her every second since she's born, fevers, diapers, she's growing up, she's going through a million things. I'll put her to bed, I kiss her goodnight, I read her stories, I take her out to see the marathon, bang, a bomb goes off and kills her. What am I going to do? What am I going to want to do to the person who did that? I want to beat the guy to death. I don't care about trials. I don't care about indictments. I don't care about Miranda laws. I don't give a shit. Give me the guy, and I want to make sure I know who did it. Right, first, which is why we have laws, by the way, to have a trial, to present evidence and facts. Otherwise, we're living in cave times where whoever's got the biggest club or has got the the most muscles beats the other one to death and grabs their family and drags them off or whatever, or takes their food or eats them. We're not supposed to be living like that, right? We're supposed to have evolved as a group of people, as a civilization. So, but if that happened to my kid, I would want revenge. So we all understand revenge. All of us in our guts, we understand revenge. Your first reaction to something like this, fear. Your next reaction, rage. Let's get the people. Let's get the people who did it. Let's get the people who did it. So what does the president say? He comes out and he makes a speech. He says, I forget. I have it in front of me somewhere. I forget what it says. It says something like, one of the things he said was, the weight of justice will fall heavily on these people. The weight of justice will fall heavily on whoever did it. This is before they knew who did it, right? Well, you know what? What about the weight of justice? Where is that going to fall? And when is that going to fall on the President of the United States or the head of the Defense Department or the CIA or the commander of a drone wing when a missile, and this is about 10 days ago, when an airstrike, rather, in this case, is called in by the CIA to support an operation they were maintaining somewhere in eastern Afghanistan. They find a Taliban commander who's been giving Afghan and American troops a hard time, right? He's been setting up IEDs. He's been launching mortar attacks. They know where his house is now. They get information. They call in an airstrike, and they bomb the house. They killed 16 people. 1 or 2 may have been either him or his associate. They injure 5 women and they kill 10 children. If you pick up the newspaper or go online, you can see their pictures. One of them was an infant. One of them was a little girl. It could have been the same girl that you, if you're a father, took to the Boston Marathon. Or maybe if you're listening to me, maybe you took your daughter out the other day, or you're planning to take your daughter somewhere tomorrow to a picnic or to a carnival or to a show or to a baseball game or something. They have little girls too over there, and their little girls are no different than our little girls. But somebody has, for the last 10 years, including Mr. Obama, who's talking about the weight of justice, has called in airstrikes, has authorized, personally authorized, in his office, blood on his hands, drone strikes which have killed near 1,000 innocent people, men, women, and children, never get a chance to grow up, blown to bits or mutilated beyond recognition because of what? What we have to understand is that we are all in the same boat. People will not get this. We're all in the same boat. When you launch a drone strike and you kill a child, a 9-year-old girl in Afghanistan, you're killing your own daughter. When a bomb is set by anybody and it blows somebody's leg off, you're blowing your own leg off. When you call in an airstrike and you launch a rocket into a house and you kill an old woman, you killed your own mother. People don't get it. We're all the same. We're all people. And I have to say that there is something wrong with men. I don't know what is wrong with men. It's always men who do this stupid shit. Sometimes there's women involved. I mean, look at this movie Homeland, right? I mean, the TV show Homeland. Sometimes there are women high up. Margaret Thatcher just died. What was it? A couple of weeks ago or a week ago, something like that. So another, person is out of the world. And all sorts of people were mourning, oh, Margaret Thatcher, she was an example for women. Oh, really? Some example. Austerity, warfare, you know what I mean? She was a nasty bitch. Put her where it is, right? Reagan died. Nixon died. All these people are at their funerals. These are people who murdered tens of thousands of people. These are people who broke the laws of their own countries and the laws of humanity. Why stand around and weep for these people? If they've got relatives and friends, let them shed their tears. Who gives a shit? I'm glad they're dead. They should have been dead a long time ago. Life would have been better for all of us. But why is it mostly men that do this stuff? What is wrong with men? If you're a woman, I guess you have to be asking, what is wrong with men? Why do they do this to each other? When is this revenge and bullshit attacking back and forth going to stop? There are people among us, boys and girls, who want to have everything we have. They want to run everything. They want to be in charge of everything because for some reason they grew up in a way, either they were born this way or because they were beat up or neglected when they were little, or something is wrong with them, where they want to have things that they don't even need. They want to have billions of dollars. They want to own 1 million acres of land. They want to run other countries. They want profit. They will stop at nothing. They will kill people. They will start wars. They will corrupt governments. And those people have been running our government for a long, long time. And they have it in their hands now tighter than they ever had it before. And the Supreme Court makes a Citizens United decision and hands that whole political process straight into the hands of rich people. Last year, in 2012, 10 hedge fund managers made as much money as, if you approximated the number of people who get paid this, 196,000 nurses. Where do I have this here? This is from Les Leopold, who's on this show all the time. Let me put it more clearly. The new rich list is out. This is a listing of the richest people in the country and what they did to have this money. The rich list is out. Yet another example of financial pornography. While nearly 15 million Americans still can't find jobs due to the 2008 Wall Street-created crash, the top hedge manager, David Tepper, earned $1,057,692 an hour. I'm sorry, $1,057,600. This man earned $1 million an hour if you broke down his whole income. $1 million an hour in 2012. Doing what? Manipulating mortgage derivatives? And that's as much as the average American family makes in 21 years. So this son of a bitch, Tepper, and we should take all his money away from him, except leave him with a few bucks so he can buy a hot dog. This son of a bitch manipulates money markets, makes up derivatives, is living on the edge of what everybody would consider ethical or honest, doesn't do a damn bit of good for anybody in the whole world, takes and takes and takes, makes $1 million a year, probably doesn't pay any taxes or hardly any, and that's what an average American family makes in 21 years. Together, this last year, the top 10 hedge fund managers waltzed off with $10.1 billion. The top 10 hedge fund managers walked off with $10.1 billion, which is more than enough to hire 250,000 entry-level teachers or 196,000 new registered nurses. The 10 richest people in the United States, the Waltons, Bloomberg, the Koch brothers, and throw in a couple of other people, the 10 richest people in this country have assets or money or cash of $200 billion. 10 people. 10 people. That is enough to hire back every laid-off teacher, fireman, firefighters, cop, sanitation worker, emergency medical technician. It's enough to hire every last one of these people that was laid off, that makes our life better in this country, that actually helps people, saves people's lives, educates people. Hire them all back, and with money left over to build tens of thousands of windmills to provide alternative electricity. And yet we let these people keep this money? If we lived in a decent society, we would take this money away from these people. Leave them with $1 million if they need money so bad. Leave them with their 15 houses and their 21 cars and their 6 yachts and all the other bullshit that they have from doing nothing good for anybody. Take it away from them. Why do we tolerate this? And why do I bring this up? Because it's the same way all over the world and in this country. If we have people we have a small group of people who have almost everything, and the rest of us have very little and are just scratching to get by and working like dogs and not getting raises for 10 years. And believe me, I know what I'm talking about. If we're doing that, and then we have hundreds of millions of people, maybe 1 billion people who are on the verge of starvation, who are actually starving, how are we allowing this to happen? Bottom line, all of the people in the world have to get together and throw off, and this sounds like some kind of communist, chatter, but we do have to throw off the yoke that these people have thrown on us. In this country, we're supposed to have a democracy. How do we allow criminals like this to gather all this money, evade their taxes? Last year, in 2011, General Electric made something like $10 billion in profits, some of it making weapons to blow people up and murder people all over the world, right? And chemicals that are destroying our environment. $10 billion in profits. You know what they paid in taxes? You just filed your taxes, right? April 15th was tax due date. What'd you pay? They took the money out of your check anyhow, right? But maybe you paid $3,000 in tax last year. Maybe you paid $21,000 in tax. Whatever it is that you paid the federal government, the state government. You know how much GE paid on their profit in 2011? Nothing. You paid more tax than all of the General Electric company. What world are we living in here? And when the president says the weight of justice is going to fall on these people, when is the weight of justice going to fall on him? The weight of justice is falling on America because of the activities and the actions throughout the last several decades, and it's been going on throughout history, but in the last couple of decades, of a few centralized, power-hungry, corporate-connected people who are running this country, who are taking us to war, who are cheating us out of our Social Security, who are taking money away from our check and bribing each other with it. There are 33,000 lobbyists in Washington. This is supposed to be a democracy. You want to vote for the lesser of two evils? Obama has pursued whistleblowers who are trying to show what the government is doing. He's putting them in jail. In Guantanamo, they beat people and torture people, and people are starving themselves to death. They can't take it anymore. Half of them are probably innocent. And they arrest this guy, this son of a bitch, this poor kid, this misled poor kid, who is now a mass murderer and who crippled all these people up there, and God knows what's going to happen to him. They arrest this guy. And he is in America, right? He's in America. He's not an enemy. They're treating him like an enemy combatant, like they picked him up on some field in Afghanistan or behind a rock in Somalia, and they're probably going to torture him to find out what else is going on. Well, that's something that I hope to hear from you about. This is a tricky issue, right? I mean, who else? Is there anybody else out there? Was he associated with anybody else? It looks like he wasn't. It was just him and his crazy brother, and the two of them crazy when you think about it. So two last things. What happened to the Miranda law? If they can pick anybody up that they want, do they have to even give you a reason? They don't read him his rights. He has no lawyer. They can stick him in Guantanamo forever if they want. And they can do the same to you or to me. They could pick you out of a line at a protest and say you're a terrorist. And who's to say you're not? Right? If they say you are, and they don't have to read you your rights, you won't get a lawyer. Do we have a democracy at all anymore? You need laws like the Miranda law. We live in a civilization that protects us with these laws. We have to extend the same protection to the worst of us. We have to do it. And if we don't fix this income inequality, then this kind of thing is going to go on forever. People who have nothing and who are oppressed and brutalized by people who have a lot will not forgive. They will come back at us, and they are coming back at us. Now, this Miranda thing is important, and let me just close with this before we go to a little music. After the 7 o'clock news is when I would like you to call. I tell my wife, I do have a sore throat. I don't know what, she said, don't talk so much, too late for that, right? Tomorrow she's going to really give me a hard time because I won't be able to even speak. However, that's my problem at home. There are terrorists everywhere. They're not always where you think they are. There was a play written, I don't know, it was in the 1960s or 70s called A Man for All Seasons. We ran on Broadway. And, we never took a break. Oh, no. I'll come back and I'll read you this after the 7 o'clock news. I forgot in my zeal here that we hadn't even taken a break. We'll take a break now, and then we'll see you after the 7 o'clock news. I'm going to read you this little thing about the Miranda rules, and then we'll come back. All right. There's a sense of grief, since we're all in the same boat. There's a sense of grief we all have to have, not just for the people who got killed, but specifically for the people who got killed and who got wounded up in Boston, and for the families. We all have to join in that grief. But the grief is for ourselves too, and it's for everybody. And once again, let me just say that when an Air Force rocket hits a house and kills 10 children over there, 10 of our children are killed. When, a drone missile strike blows the leg off some old lady walking through a town in Somalia or in Yemen, that old lady had her leg blown off in this country. When you kill somebody, you kill yourself. We're all the same people. Now, last thing about religion. Islam, Judaism, Christianity, not as in Christ, but Christianity, I think it would help immensely. It would solve so many problems in the world if we could somehow magically, instantly eliminate all organized religion. Because these old twisted bastards in Judaism and Islam and in Christianity who declare war on blasphemers, who fill us full of notions of sin and revenge, they're the ones who are responsible every time somebody dies in this world. If it isn't the oil companies and the executives who want to grab something that belongs to somebody else, these people are the ones that cause this, and the rest of us in a democracy let them get away with it. That's from the Miranda law. Here's from the New York Times. This is the article, I think, today, right? So, you know what happened is they killed one of these brothers and captured the other, and there's no doubt that these people, I have no doubt, that these people are probably the ones who did it. And it says here, a federal law enforcement official said he would not be read. This is the younger 19-year-old. He was wounded or something, and they took him into custody. He would not be read his Miranda rights because the authorities would be invoking the public safety exception in order to question him extensively about other potential explosive devices or accomplices and try to gain intelligence. I know they do this all over the world. Look at Guantanamo. They do it all the time. These are enemy combatants. They don't have a uniform. They don't belong to a national sovereign state, whatever the excuse, whatever the reason is. And then it's really true. And this is a question we can talk about. You can call up and comment about this. If this guy knows that there is an imminent threat of hundreds of other people being blown up and mutilated, then maybe he should be dealt with harshly. And they're probably going to torture him to find out about this. But I know this happens all over the place, all over the world. The United States has been doing this for a long time without us knowing about it and violating everybody else's human rights in the course of it. Maybe they have an excuse for it. Maybe there's a good reason for it. And here, they've caught this guy. He lives in the United States. I don't know. He may be an American citizen. He's been here most of his life since he was a kid. It happens here in this country. What is to stop them, the federal government, federal officials, whatever you want to call them, from picking you out of an Occupy demonstration or picking you up right out of your house, declaring that you are an enemy combatant and you have no rights. You have no lawyer. They disappear you. They don't read you your rights. You have no trial. You can languish in some cell or some in Guantanamo forever after that. When did this start happening in this country? I didn't even know they were allowed to do that in this country. These laws, the Miranda case was heard in 1971, I think, by the Supreme Court. It decided in 71. There's a reason we have laws here. It's not just to protect other people. It's to protect ourselves, too. Because somebody's in power now, they think they can do anything to anybody. What happens if somebody else is in power? Then they're the ones who could get it. That's something that we all understand or are supposed to understand. These kinds of laws are here to protect us all from bad people. And, you know, that's why we have to extend the protection to the worst of us. That's why we have to do it. There was a play written in the 60s and 70s, which was turned into a movie called A Man for All Seasons. And it's about, the history is upside down, by the way, but that's another story. But it's a really terrific play and a really, really great movie, A Man for All Seasons, and it's a British production. And they bring this guy to court, Sir Thomas More, and he wasn't agreeing with what King Henry wanted, right? You know, that this King Henry VIII, one of the worst dictatorial, murderous, crazy kings in English history, right? And the king had absolute power over everybody. He could just behead anybody. He could disappear people. He could seize their land. He was a brutal dictator, right? King Henry VIII. And he wanted to do something, and he wanted to marry his, like, seventh wife or execute his current wife and marry another one. And Sir Thomas More, who had some high office, he was the chancellor or something like that, or one of the heads of the church in England, says, no, you can't do that. So he's frustrating the king's wishes. So he has Sir Thomas More arrested for sedition and conspiracy to conspire against the king, right? He has him arrested. And the prosecutor's name is William Roper. He's a crazy, mad, aggressive prosecutor for the king. And at one point in his trial, Sir Thomas More says, he says that he would even, that they're not observing the law. They're not going through the regular, channels of the law, and it's a crime that they're not doing this because the laws are there for to protect civilization for all of our benefit. And he said he believes so much in the law and justice that he would even allow the devil to argue to get his day in court. And the prosecutor says to him, so now you give the devil the benefit of the law? And Sir Thomas More says, yes, what would you do? Cut a great road through the law to get after the devil? Roper says, yes, I'd cut down every law in England to do that. And Sir Thomas More says, oh, and when the last law was down and the devil turned round on you, where would you hide, Roper? The laws all being flat. This country is planted thick with laws from coast to coast, man's laws, not God's. And if you cut them down and you're just a man to do it, do you really think you could stand upright in the winds that would blow then? Yes, I'd give the devil the benefit of the law for my own safety's sake. I don't care what this guy did. He needs to be dealt with in a legal way, or else we all have no rights. All right, enough of me. If you want to get in touch with me, I'll say one last time, go to my website, Fader Files. If you want to find out what else I do on the radio, you want to get in touch with me, go to Fader Files, FEDER, FILES.com, and you can contact me, join my mailing list if you want. The number here, and I presume, if I haven't talked you all to death, that you all have opinions about this, is 866-997-4748. 866-997-4748. I really can't hardly speak much anymore, so I expect you to all help me out. We were talking about service earlier, service to other people. Do me a favor. Do me a solid, like they used to say. Give me a call, 866-997-4748. Give me your opinion on the things you heard tonight. If you're a veteran, we had the interview in the first hour and all the stuff about the Boston marathon bombings and what's been going on, terrorism, whatever else. Do we have any calls? Dave from Michigan. I want people to call up. Join Dave from Michigan here. Go ahead, Dave.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, Mike. Good to talk to you. I'm retired from law enforcement, and from what I've gathered, I sort of came in at the end of your conversation. It sounds to me as though what they're trying to do is, they already have enough evidence, they believe, to prosecute this guy. And the Miranda warning only means that if they interview him and they ask him questions and he answers the questions, his answers can't be used against him in a court of law. And I think what may be happening here is that they have sufficient evidence, they believe, the way it is right now, and they're looking for any other connections. And if they, Mirandize the guy and he lawyers up, then that may, tail off what they can get for other information.
Well, I mean, I understand their point of view, and in fact, it's a very real question. I mean, let's say you lived in Boston, or let's say, and you have a kid and you live near you would be scared to death that there's other people maybe running around, or maybe he planted other bombs. Maybe in that case, you wouldn't be so happy about the man being read his rights and lawyering up and clamming up. On the other hand, the larger issue is what I'm raising,
Well, are his rights being violated?
Well, of course they're being violated. If he doesn't get a chance to be quiet, and if he has to indict himself and doesn't have access to a lawyer or no habeas corpus, then he's not having his rights.
Well, of course, now that assumes that they're not going to take him before a judge and arraign him. I haven't heard that. All I heard was that they were not going to Mirandize him. Well,
that means that they could question him without a lawyer present, which is against the constitutional rights of Americans.
But if the prosecution is forbidden from using that information against him, he's not self-indicting. That's the fine line that I'm looking at, and I don't really know.
Uh-huh.
I don't know exactly, but technically, that's what Miranda means, is that if you take someone into custody,
mm-hmm.
they're in your custody and you question them, you interrogate them, you get information out of them. If you didn't Mirandize them, you cannot use that information against that person in a court of law.
No, but
that's the only thing Miranda does.
No, but you can't. This new rule or law that they came up with out of the blue, I never even heard that it passed, means that they could probably take this guy and disappear him into some prison camp someplace, and we'll never even hear or see him again. See, also the other thing is we all have an interest in what happened, obviously, as fellow human beings, and as Americans, we want to know where he comes from, what happened, did his brother know somebody, who's behind all this. I mean, this could help us all to, I don't know what, to feel some sense of resolution or maybe some security. We want to know all these things. And we would like to know who's behind it. And let me further state, because you didn't listen to the whole thing, that sometimes people are behind these things that we don't want to even imagine who are behind these things, if you know what I mean. And
Absolutely.
If this guy's going to be kept utterly silent, what is that telling the rest of us?
Well, I guess in this case, we're both making assumptions. I'm making an assumption that he'll probably be arraigned in court this week, and I hope he is.
Yeah, me too.
I think you're making an assumption that he'll be disappeared, and I certainly
no. I'm saying what I'm saying is more. What I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is these things have happened. The United States government has done this with other people routinely all the time for the last several years, right? They just disappear people, and you don't hear from them anymore, and nobody hears their story. They don't have their day in court, and they languish around. Half the people they released from Guantanamo already have admittedly been said to be innocent, right? And I don't want this guy.
That sort of behavior is totally inexcusable.
Yeah, I don't want this guy to disappear because I want to know exactly what happened. Even if it was just him and his brother, I want to know what happened. It would set my mind more at ease to know it. And so it would set everybody's mind at ease. I just don't want him to suddenly disappear from view. If the day I see him standing up in court with a lawyer in an American court at an arraignment and, being able to speak to his lawyer and everything like that, I will breathe a sigh of relief.
I'll be standing right beside you, Mike.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Thank you much.
Okay.
Bye.
Who do we have? Michelle, you're on, Michelle.
Hi. I agree with you. This boy became a United States citizen in, I think it was 2010, on September 11th. He is a U.S. citizen. He needs to have his rights read to him. The man that did the shooting in Arizona, which to me is a terrorist act, an assassination attempt upon one of our people of Congress, he was read his rights. He was an American citizen. It was a terrorist act. just because this boy came from another country, he still became a U.S. citizen, and he deserves to have his rights read to him, his Miranda rights.
Well, but this is
choose who.
Here's the
read these rights to.
Well, you're right. I agree with you. I agree with you completely. But here's their argument. Here's the government's argument, right? Here is a guy, him and his brother, wrapped in explosives. Literally, one of them had explosives apparently on his body. The government says, and they say that they're the ones who did this. They apparently may have actually told somebody in a car hijacking they did it. Whatever it is, they have what I would probably call sufficient cause to believe that he may have planted other bombs or that there are explosives in other places. So what they're saying is the reason they're not reading him his rights is, and they're probably going to beat him up or torture him or do something else or question him in a way that's not legal to find out if there's an imminent danger of explosion somewhere else. That's their argument.
Well, their argument is still he is an American citizen and he has his rights. They can't, just because it's bombings. What makes it any different from anyone else that goes out and does a mass terrorist attack, including the attack that happened in Newtown, including the attack that happened in Colorado at the movie theater? Why should those people, because they were born here, get their rights read to them? Of course, the guy that was in Newtown did commit suicide, but why should they be allowed to have their rights read to them, be Mirandized, and have a lawyer? But this boy, who is from another country but is a United States citizen, became a U.S. citizen, not have his rights read to him as any other American citizen has the right to have.
Well, once again,
Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah,
I read to him.
Yeah, and he was the great.
And he was a terrorist.
He was one of the worst terrorists that ever existed in this country.
The same bombs planted in other places, but he still had his rights read to him. This to me is, like you were saying earlier, if they can do it to somebody just because they think that there's something else out there that they might have done or have planned, does not give them license to take away his rights as an American citizen. Because then they could come to me and say, "Oh, I think that you might be planning a terrorist attack. Let me take you out of your home."
Well, now there's the point, isn't it? If they don't like you, or they don't want you talking about what they did, or if they don't even like to be criticized, they can grab you just for that reason, make up some plot or an excuse, plant evidence on you, and the same thing would happen to you, which is why this guy needs to have his rights.
The American citizen that they sent the drone after and killed him, he was an American citizen. They killed this man. What makes people think that you're any safer just because you're an American citizen if they can do this to him, and him being a natural, or is it naturalized citizen?
Probably, yeah.
When they go, when they come to this country as an immigrant and then become a citizen as
that's the point. I mean, you extend even I'm saying allegedly, you extend even to the worst person, or allegedly the worst person, the same rights that you would want for yourself.
Yes, because the law is the law, and we need to follow the law. If we don't follow the law, then what is to stop us from becoming, pre-World War II Germany, or having going back to being a like you were talking earlier about the kings, having kings that rule over people that can come in and behead you at any time.
Well, I think we're dangerously close to that right now. I'm getting a signal that we should.
We are getting dangerously close.
We got to move on and take another call.
To becoming like the
okay,
Taliban.
we're gonna take another call now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Who do we have? Danny in Woodstock. You're on.
Hey, Mike, this is Jimmy in Woodstock,
hey.
And I just turned on the radio, and I'm going to put Fanny on. She's got some interesting questions and statements.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
So there are a couple of things I want to say. I really agree with you very much that, we shouldn't believe in anything of what the government says. And so there is no reason for, at least for me, to believe that these kids did whatever they say that, the government says that they did. And, I think my opinion is that they were framed, some way or another. I believe that the kid, since in the hospital, is going to die probably and will never know anything. And the other thing is, what happened with the explosion in Texas? Isn't that also some kind of it's a terrorist act?
No, now
there is more people. There is more people that died there. The owner is nobody knows what's his name. We don't know how many people died there. Everybody's talking about Boston, but the thing in Texas was worse than what happened in Boston.
Mm-hmm. So you think that was a terrorist act?
Yeah, that's some kind of a terrorist act.
What makes you think that?
Because it's the people that that own that company didn't follow the rules, and so if something happened there, means that they really didn't care what.
So you're extending the definition of terrorism. You're calling that a kind of like corporate terrorism, right? Right. Okay.
Right.
All right.
And so nobody talks about it, and it happened at the same time, and it was worse because there were more people that were affected by it, and we don't know how long it's going to be affecting, the people that are alive because they are breathing those fumes. That,
Well, that is what you're bringing up is an important point. There is a greater kind of terrorism that we have to face every day here in this country that we all live with, which is corporate terrorism. It's the terrorism of the rich and the powerful against the rest of us. And when a factory like that, when a fertilizer plant like that, where they've already been cited for violations of rules and where there are dangers in the community, but people think they can get away with it because, the federal government's not going to enforce the rules or because it's all about making money, and then a place blows up. Well, there's a kind of terrorism there, and you're right about that. We have to move on. Take another.
They even don't put the name of the owner.
I know, but they will eventually. We got to move on. Take another call. Thanks, Fanny.
Okay, thank you.
Don in Texas, you're on.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry you've lost your voice, but that was a magnificent rant. You were really nailing it today.
I'll pay for it tomorrow. I have to deal with my wife, and that's worse than any terrorist. Let me tell you, she'll get me for this, man. Because I promised I wouldn't do it. Go ahead.
I've been married. I know where you're coming from.
All right. Nah, she's a nice woman. She won't yell at me. She'll just let me stew in my own juice. Go ahead.
Anyhow, on the question of Mirandization, or however they term it, the BBC not 2 hours ago had Alan Dershowitz on precisely this subject. And Dershowitz, apart from a few remarks about the constitutionality, pointed out that the authorities, I think were his exact words, have shot themselves in the foot. You, on the one hand, have Obama saying that they're going to invoke this public safety clause. You, on the other hand, have the authorities on the scene, those thousands and thousands of cops, saying, no more bombs, no more suspects, go on about your business, these are not the droids you're looking for. There's just a flat contradiction. And the ACLU, by the way, is already raising holy hell about this.
I don't understand. I guess of all the things I try to keep track of, there's a million things to keep track of. I must have dropped a stitch somewhere. I didn't know that this law had existed in the first place and that it could be applied inside the United States to somebody who's an American citizen.
I didn't either.
I'm shocked to see this. I'm surprised.
And I guess neither did the BBC, because they went and called in Dershowitz, who on questions like this is, generally speaking, a pretty heavy hitter.
I think it's a pretty scary thing because truly, the line between that guy and somebody who gets on the radio like me, or somebody who calls a radio station like you being a terrorist. In their mind, anybody who disagrees with them or gets out on the street or waves a sign is a terrorist now.
Well, it's been it's been that way since back in the '60s when we were both a hell of a lot younger. I'm the guy from Long Island.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I remember. I remember.
And you remember, COINTELPRO.
Sure.
Having had some interesting friends in interesting places, I've seen my own FBI file.
Oh, really? You saw your own FBI file?
Yeah.
I don't believe that I would order mine because I don't think the floorboards would hold it up.
Well, that's about the size of mine was. For Christ's sake, I was 24 years old at the time.
my FBI file. We'd have to have an extra room in my apartment for it.
Yeah. Hey, in case anyone's interested, there's been a lot of flack over the totally blown media coverage of this. So I got one amusing clip from somebody, Tom Hartman, quoted his chat room on the air. The clip was, a CNN producer has been found under a desk, curled into the fetal position, muttering, "Make it stop, make it stop."
Well, CNN has once again proved itself to be the clowns of broadcasting. I mean, their showing during the last few days has made them the laughing stock, where they're already bad off, but now they are truly the laughing stock of the entire broadcast industry.
If that question is of interest to you or other members of the audience, Michael Enfield is going to devote, I think, a full segment, meaning an hour.
Who is this and where is he?
Michael Enfield, the host of the Sunday edition on the CBC. That's cbc.ca/Sunday edition.
Okay, cbc.ca/Sunday
edition.
Okay, that's Canadian Broadcasting Company, and check it out. We got to move on to another call.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Michael is good.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Let's take another call, and then we're going to go to a break. Those of you who are hang on through the break. We'll go straight back to your calls. Go ahead. Abdul, hey, how you doing?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, been a pretty interesting week, to say the least. But what can I say? The media has done it again. Not just CNN, but the New York Post, and trying to put that big article saying that they brought in a Saudi national or something like that, and they basically accused of being a suspect, but it turns out that guy, if anything, that guy was a witness. But too late. The horse already out of the barn, because what the media is not mentioning is maybe a few Arab fellas are actually getting assaulted in the streets as a result of it. They're throwing around phrases like Arab, dark-skinned. How's that one, right? Dark-skinned. That'll do it. Yeah, that'll do it. I too am taken aback by saying that guy was not Mirandized, not read his rights or anything like that. Yeah, it's amazing, right? Yeah, did Tim McVeigh get like a lawyer or something? Yeah, good. He did. Okay, and my other people. So maybe that might be an issue in 2016. Maybe the Green Party could look into that, hopefully. Well, if there is another election. Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, elections are a threat to democracy now, I think. That's true. That's my quick take on that. Now, see you guys around. All right, see you later, Mike. Okay, Abdul. We're going to go to a break. Anybody who's on the line, please hold on. If you want to call and give your opinion about this, and I know you must have an opinion, 866-997-4748. Give us a call, and we'll put you on the air. So we'll go to a break, be back in 3 minutes. Okay, Roy, you're on the air, Roy.
Yeah, two things. One, CBC is on 159 on Sirius, but not on the XM side. So I listen to Michael Enright. I usually listen to him on Sunday morning, right on Sirius. And another thing, nobody's bringing up the Patriot Act. I read about this 10 years ago, that if they declare someone a terrorist, even though he's native, not even a native born, but American citizen or Native American citizen, they can just remand them over to.
So
you're going to court.
So this is where their this exception they're claiming is coming out of the Patriot Act, perhaps.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I read about this 10 years ago when they passed the thing. I said, and there's so many different avenues from this Patriot Act that nobody read before they signed it into law, that they're just going with the flow and just making crap up as they go along. So, yeah, it's something to look at. And I think this guy will probably end up in Guantanamo, and the ACLU they'll tell him to go pound sand. So that's my statement on that. So,
all right.
Bye.
Thanks for calling. Who do we have? John from Indiana, you're on.
Hey, Mike. Great show. And I tell you, the paranoids are after me, dude. I mean, the caller you had from Woodstock was a little over the edge there. I don't think she was looking. I don't think she checked into the facts of that explosion in Texas. Be that as it may, I myself feel a little paranoid, or more than a little paranoid, about the kid's loss of Miranda rights in the interrogation that's about to happen when he gets out of the hospital bed. What I would love to have, in the absence of Miranda rights, is a person of good faith present, and a video and audio recording of the entire interview and interrogation. I want to find out whether the FBI, in its infinite wisdom, might have been involved somehow in inducing him and his brother into this.
See, now there is an interesting point, because there's a lot of people. The range of reactions and conclusions about 9/11 is, it includes that the government not necessarily actually blowing up the building, but knowing that this was going to happen and allowing it to happen. And there's lots of people in this world who believe that it's possible, it's just possible, that because we have to, because we're with, the American public in the last year, in the last several months, the last few weeks, is getting very, very upset about all these drone attacks and all the violations of our Constitution. The people in this country are tired of war, and yet the people in charge of the country want to have another war, either with North Korea or Iran. They want to keep doing what they've been doing, and they really need something like this to happen. The fact that they really need something to terrify all of us into renewing all their ability to take away our rights is something that has to make you wonder, right?
It makes me wonder all the time, and it makes me wonder whether we are in an endless, undeclared or declared war, a war without end that would permit the Guantanamo prisoners to be kept, for a decade until they die in prison. What we're turning into is utterly something out of Orwell. It's not something. It's something that I learned in high school that we would, of course, never become. But we're becoming it, and I'm afraid anyway that we are becoming it, and I'm very afraid for ourselves and the future of our country. And I'm not. It is not beyond the FBI either in its thoughtlessness or in its stupidity. To be behind this, or to have ignored signals, handwriting that was clearly written on the wall somewhere along the way. I think there was a news report by some credible sources that somebody had a hand in interviewing one or more of these brothers at the request of the Russian government.
What happened was that the older brother, about 2 years ago, spent 6 months, I think it was last year or the year before, spent 6 months over in Russia and paid a visit with a relative to some people in Chechnya, where there's a lot of established terrorist networks that have been fighting with the Russians for decades, right? And so the Russians knew about this visit and wanted to get the United States authorities to question this guy, and they did, about what he was doing over there when he was in Chechnya and what his connections were. And theoretically, what I read in the paper was that the FBI, or actually the FBI, questioned this guy, and they decided that he wasn't a threat to anybody. That's what the news is.
God.
Well, I mean, who knows? Yeah, who knows?
It's almost like 2001, the prelude to 9/11, playing over again.
Yeah, you have to, and that's the saddest thing of all. Like you said when you called up, the saddest thing of all is that we would even entertain this possibility. When I was growing up, 50s, 60s, 70s, yeah, the government did this, the government did that they would actually, set something up or allow something to happen or lie to us so deliberately to have a war. We were all naive, I guess, but we didn't even conceive of a thing like that, right? But now it's almost the first thing that pops into your head.
Oh, yeah. I mean, ever since at least going back to the Mexican-American War of 1836, wasn't that based on a pretext?
Well, that was kind of complicated. Basically, you got a lot of Texans who wanted to have Texas for themselves and then maybe join it to the United States. So one thing and another. I mean, after all, most of the stuff that we've done in the world, we're losing your signal. It's getting kind of jammed. So we'll have to. All right, thanks. Yeah, well, no more history lessons. I talked enough tonight. Who do we have? Dave from Mississippi. David, you're on. You there?
How you doing, sir?
Hey.
Let me just say something. I understand what you're saying in some ways about the Miranda rights. But whenever the police have visually seen you throwing bombs at them and shooting at them, don't you think you kind of lose those at some point?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I think what they should do is what they did do. They captured him. You arrest the guy, and then you read him his rights, and he gets a lawyer, and then you prove what he did because the evidence probably is very sufficient to prove it. And you go through democracy, you go through civilization, you go through laws, you prove the guy did it, and you punish him. That's America.
But I'm sorry, though. I'm tired of us trying to treat these guys as if they robbed a 7-Eleven, and no pun intended about that, or as if, they snatched a purse. There's a totally different thing involved here.
You know who Timothy McVeigh is, right?
Yes, sir. I absolutely do.
Now, when they found that guy, and they arrested him, and he had a lawyer, and he had his rights.
I'm sorry, though, but in this world now, we are fighting a regular army. This isn't like fighting the Nazis, where they're an organized, uniform army. We know what they are. This is networks. This is, it's just a so different thing. It's basically just espionage.
What if what if the federal government got it into their head, for whatever reason, that they defined you. They had a meeting somewhere in an office, and they decided that what's your name? What's your first name? I forget.
David.
They said, this guy David, we think he's a terrorist. Maybe it's because they don't like you. Maybe a neighbor complained about you, or somebody's got a grudge against you, turns you into the FBI for no good reason. But they decide because you said something in a coffee shop one day and somebody overheard you. You said something about the president, you don't like him, whatever. They decide you're a terrorist. They can pick you up and you have no rights.
I don't believe that they would just pick up somebody just out of the blue like that.
Oh, you don't really? You don't really think so, huh?
I don't believe that they would just pick somebody up out of the blue. I'm sorry, though, but,
Okay, all right, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it.
I am tired of the truther movement. I'm tired of somebody saying Sandy Hook. Did you realize how ridiculous that was?
Ridiculous? What? I'm sorry, I'm not following you. What?
Whenever you have the Sandy Hook truthers, the Aurora truthers, everybody's a truther now.
Truther? What do you mean? Truther means...
There's evil in the world and there's bad things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, though, but this whole idea that, the government set up Sandy Hook, and I'm going to tell you, I live in NRA country down here, and some people actually really are buying into the idea that was a setup. And
I see. In other words, they thought that was a setup so that the government would clamp down on gun ownership.
Yeah.
And
a lot of people were saying that a lot of people have said that the Aurora thing was a dry run. Nobody really got that mad. What would get people really going?
Mm-hmm.
Little kids. Which, in some ways, I'm going to tell you, I don't necessarily doubt it. The more and more I hear it, I wouldn't necessarily put that past them. But just to go pick up some random guy, I'm sorry, that's a whole different difference than when you're taking on a whole police department and you got automatic weapons, you're throwing pipe bombs at them.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think really that he needed to get his rights read to him?
No, you're throwing pipe bombs and shooting automatic weapons at the police.
But people shoot at the cops all the time, and they get their rights read to them.
Well, again, I'm telling you though, this guy knew the situation. They could turn themselves in. They carjack somebody. I'm sorry though, but no, you lose your rights at some point. You have the right of freedom of speech. You can't go fire in a movie theater. You can't go threaten to kill somebody.
And yet, I live in New York City, and, it's a big city. There's a lot of violence, and, in a lot of cities, or even in towns, there's violence all the time. People are, in this country, every single day, somebody is shooting somebody. Often the police are shot at almost every couple of days in this country. Sometimes police officers are killed or they're wounded. There's shootouts with guys. They arrest them. They take them to court, and they read them their rights. They get a lawyer. They go to trial. They get convicted.
So let me ask you this. So I have a videographic evidence of these guys setting down backpacks and detonating bombs. I mean, what more could you want?
Nothing. And that's it. But you know what? That's exactly the point. If they have the evidence, they know they're going to win in a trial. You prove how democracy works. What better way to prove how democracy works? Catch the bad guys. You got the evidence. Prove it in court. Put them away. That's democracy.
But we're after information. So let me ask you something. We go to read him his rights. He lawyers up, as they say, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We convict him and all. 3 weeks from now, somebody blows up, JFK.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out, it was one of this guy's associates. How do you answer that? Well, what do you say? Well, I'm sorry, we had to, bring the guy ice cream and a Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm. No, that's why I brought it up in the first place. I said I was bringing that up earlier in the earlier hour. This is a really, really tricky issue. I mean, if he's associated with other people, and it's an open question. Personally, I think that there's ways to get information from this guy, and so do a lot of experts, that don't involve torture and don't involve him having to clam up. I mean, if he knows somebody else who did this, I think there's ways that they could figure this out. I mean, there are video cameras everywhere. Everybody knows his movements, relatives, friends, people will track him. I'm not so sure that they have to do this, but you're making a good point. This is what scares people, that he may know actual other people now with bombs ready to blow people up. And if they read him his rights, then nobody will know it and people will get hurt because they read him his rights. I'm saying I agree. This is an open question. That's a very difficult thing. I just don't like the idea that an American citizen can be arrested on general principles here because he committed a violent act, which people do every day. And this particular guy doesn't get read his rights. I don't know if I like that idea, but you're making a good point. So it sounds contradictory.
Let me ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one more question. So, a person goes to a local police department with a weapon, shoots a police all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they go in there. Let's say they have an automatic weapon. They go in there and they kill 25 police officers. Let's say instead of 25 kids, it's 25 police officers.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say they go into a fire department.
No, I get the point. I get the point. Go ahead.
And so at that point, I'm sorry though, you got the evidence. Case shut. You lost your rights whenever you made that decision to go in there and do it.
Does that go for any crime that anybody commits?
To me, any kind of mass murder, yeah.
Oh, so you would draw the line there. In other words, if there was a robbery or a mugging or somebody sold drugs, that's one thing. But if you go ahead and you kill a lot of people, then you have no rights.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's your point of view. I get it.
Because you have no regard for human life yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we have any for you?
Okay, I hear you. Thanks for calling. Okay, who do we have? Judy in Colorado. You're on.
Hi there. Mike, you gave a great rant about the government and corporations, et cetera, earlier. What I'm calling about is totally related. I called you a few weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, about chemtrails. I've been researching the subject for 6 months.
Yeah, but not that. But you know what? That's not what we're talking about tonight. So I don't want to talk about that. Unless you have an opinion about what we're talking about, I can't take the call.
Well, I do.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
Never mind. I'll call another time.
Yeah, call another time because I want to talk about Boston tonight. Let's move on to another call. Thank you. Kendall, you're on, Kendall.
Hey, how's it going tonight?
Hey.
So I had just a quick question to help kind of maybe clarify to some of the listeners about how it would be legal for the government to not read somebody their Miranda rights. At what point in time does the government decide that they can use, I'm assuming there's some sort of terrorism clause where they can go around this reading of the Miranda rights and have it be justifiable at some legal level?
You know, this is such an important issue that I made a note this morning to get in touch with some lawyers who've been on the show before who know about constitutional issues. And I'm going to get somebody on next week, maybe the next couple of weeks, to talk about this one particular thing, because I'm very interested in this, and we should all be interested in it.
Okay, and with the Miranda rights, you said earlier that you hope to see this guy next week in court.
I would like to see him be in court, get arraigned, be locked up without bail, indicted for his various crimes, brought to trial, and proved guilty, to show me that the American system works, not just for him, but for all of us.
I would love to see that too. At this point in time, as a side note, if I don't see this man in court for 3 weeks or a month, you know, it wouldn't worry me to the point of paranoia about the government. And we talked earlier about how, you know, people are worried that this man has various connections and maybe indicated, you know, he may have associates and have more connections. And if the government, you know, decides that they need to talk with this man privately and learn if there is any immediate danger to the American public, and that needs to go under the radar for 2 or 3 weeks, to me, as an American citizen, I feel confident that the government is doing everything they can to make sure that no more citizens get hurt. And if he ends up in court, you know, next week, I'm worried that they didn't have time to do a thorough investigation, you know?
Well, you know, I tell you what, at this point, I hear what you're saying. At this point, he doesn't, you know, they're getting whatever they want from him, and they'll bring him into court whenever they want. Whenever he shows up in court, this guy, since he doesn't have rights right now, you can be guaranteed they're not going to let him get to court until they got everything out of him they want, whether it's next week or 2 weeks from now. I should take one more call.
All right.
Okay, thanks for calling. Tom in Georgia, you're on.
Hey, Mike, great show. Listen, what's the difference between the public safety exception to the Miranda rule in this case and using it on gang members and drug dealers? What's the difference? They could use it on anybody.
Why not use it on any Occupy protester that doesn't like income inequality? Why not use it on me for saying it?
Yeah, I know, but I used to practice criminal law, and they could say, well, drugs are a public safety hazard. So
that's right.
We need to know, where are the other drugs? Who are the other drug dealers? Who are the people getting drugs from you? And the same thing with, like, gang members. They say, well, some of the other members of your gang may hurt somebody someday. So we need all their names. We need to know where they live.
That's right. And tell you what, if you're smoking marijuana and you're walking down the street, you may accidentally bang into somebody because you're a little high. You're a threat to public safety.
Right. They might be driving a car.
You know, you might be jaywalking one day, and somebody has to slam on their brakes. That's a threat to public safety.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Right. And the presence of the CIA, what is their role in domestic law enforcement? That's what I want to know. I thought that was illegal.
Well, I don't. You know what? It is illegal. On one hand, it is absolutely illegal. On the other hand, what is illegal anymore?
Yeah, there's no law. There's no rule of law. They take every opportunity to drive a tractor trailer through the law, make a new exception, and make this tragedy an opportunity for them to strip away the law, to strip away everyone's rights.
There was it's true. I don't know. We'll see what develops with this, but I am going to get a lawyer on here who knows the history of this and how it applies. and see what he has to say about this public safety exception, because it seems completely unconstitutional to me. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Bye.
Bye. I guess that we really shouldn't take another call because we don't have enough time to do it. All right. So that's it for this week. We will be back next week, and we'll have a couple of more guests. I'm going to try to get a lawyer on here to talk about this public safety exception and the whole idea of Mirandizing things. And I'll try to be a devil's advocate and make the case, which is a legitimate case to make, I think, or concern, that if this guy has information that there are other people around and there are other bombs planted and they could go off, should he be granted the right to hide behind his rights, to use a certain way of putting it? And while other people may be killed or mutilated, and the clock could be ticking, and he knows things, should he have the right to not speak at all and not to incriminate himself and to exercise his rights along with everybody else? It's an open question. I think that personally I'd come down